The now expansion trap. Have you ever noticed how 1 second during a car crash can feel like an eternity, while an entire hour scrolling on your phone evaporates like it never existed? That's not just perception, it's architecture. It's the now expansion trap. Your brain doesn't just record time, it shapes it. It stretches and compresses your experience of now, depending on how overwhelmed or underwhelmed you are. When awe or terror grips you, your brain floods with data, spikes your attention, and builds a high-definition version of the present so rich in detail that you mistake it for lasting longer than it actually did. Time didn't slow down. You simply experienced more of it. This is not science fiction. It's neurology. In moments of danger, your amygdala fires like a flare, and your hippocampus kicks into emergency record mode. Suddenly, you're absorbing every sound, every motion, every flicker of light. That abundance of information makes the moment feel inflated, like your mind hit the pause button, not on reality, but on your perception of it. Think back to a moment of deep fear, a near-miss accident, a confrontation, that eerie sense that someone was watching you in the dark. Do you remember how slow everything felt? The way your thoughts became razor sharp, how each second unfolded like a page turning in slow motion. That was your brain's survival theater building the illusion of elongated time. So you could react, survive, remember. It wasn't time that changed. It was you. But the reverse is just as unsettling. When you're safe, when things are routine, familiar, when nothing surprises or stimulates you, your brain dulls its recording. It compresses, skips. You end up with less memory per second, less footage in your mental archive. So even though you might live through 8 hours of work, your mind logs at like 30 minutes. And later, when you look back, the timeline is so empty, it collapses inward. That's the compression side of the trap. But the now expansion trap is something more sinister, because it fools you into thinking you had more time than you did, or that something lasted longer simply because it felt more intense. It warps your memory. It tricks your future decisions. People who experience trauma often describe events as happening in slow motion. Not because they actually did, but because the imprint of the moment was so vivid, so overwhelming, their brains recorded it in slow frames like an old film reel dragging on purpose. But it does the same thing. Stand at the edge of a cliff. Witness a total solar eclipse. Watch a child being born. These moments, too, swell in your mind. Not because time changed, but because your brain decided this was important. And so it zoomed in, took notes, lit up the internal fireworks. This creates a strange paradox. The more emotionally loaded a moment is, the more real it feels in memory, even if it was just a blink. That's why 1 second of heartbreak can echo louder than a year of routine. Why a single compliment or insult can freeze in your memory, while entire months blur into noise. It's not the amount of time that matters. It's how deeply you were present when it happened. But here's where the trap becomes dangerous, because the mind starts chasing that expanded now. People seek fear, roller coasters, horror films, reckless behavior, not always for fun, but for that sharpened sense of living, that elongated second where everything feels real again, where the dullness disappears, where they chase awe through art, music, travel, drugs, anything to stretch the moment, to feel like time isn't slipping but standing still. But no moment can stay that stretched. It collapses. And when it does, normal time feels like a betrayal. And so the search continues. And that, too, becomes a trap. In trauma or recovery, this distortion can be a curse. Survivors often struggle because time doesn't feel linear anymore. A single flashback can make 5 years disappear. A scent, a sound, and suddenly they're back in a moment that lasted seconds but feels eternal. The past becomes sticky, not because it's more powerful, but because it was recorded in high fidelity. The now becomes cheap in comparison. And in a culture obsessed with being present, we rarely talk about the shadow side of presence. That sometimes presence hurts, sometimes it magnifies pain, sometimes it makes the unbearable inescapable. And your brain, trying to help, tries to make that pain last longer, so you remember. So you never walk blindly into danger again. But memory doesn't care about fairness. It cares about impact. So the now expansion trap leaves you with distorted maps. Memories that weigh too much, pasts that loom larger than they should, and futures that feel rushed by comparison. You look back at a terrifying moment and say, I had so much time to think. But the truth is, you didn't. You just thought faster. You saw more. You were more alive. So what do we do with this? Do we avoid awe? Do we fear fear? No. We observe the illusion. We accept that the brain is a storyteller, and time is one of its most clever lies. We learn that just because a moment felt long doesn't mean it was. And just because a day fell short doesn't mean it was wasted. Time, as we know it, isn't just measured by clocks. It's sculpted by attention. Want to stretch time? Pay attention. Deeply. Not just when you're afraid. Not just when you're overwhelmed. But now quietly. Intentionally. The trap only captures those who forget that perception is not reality. It's the lens. And once you see the lens, you can look through it and walk free. The memory duration mirage. There's a strange, almost mystical illusion hidden inside our minds, a trick of memory that plays with the very fabric of time itself. We move through our days, clocking hours and weeks and years, convinced that time is a steady river carrying us all at the same pace. But the truth is more elusive, more slippery. Not all hours are created equal. Some moments, rich with novelty, fear, love, or awe, swell inside our memories, stretching out until they feel far longer than the seconds they actually occupied. Others, days filled with repetition, bland routine, numbing sameness, shrink and blur, dissolving into a gray mist until it seems as if entire months have simply disappeared. This is the memory duration mirage, where what we remember is not just what happened, but how it felt, and how it felt determines how long it seems to have lasted. Think back to a childhood summer, maybe a single afternoon spent climbing trees, getting lost in a new city, falling in love for the first time, or experiencing loss. Notice how full those memories are. The quality of light, the taste of the air, the rush of adrenaline, the strange mix of fear and wonder. That afternoon may have lasted only a few hours, but in memory, it becomes an epic, a saga, stretching out and replaying itself in 1,000 vivid details. Now contrast that with the weeks or months you spent drifting through routine, waking up to the same alarm, sitting in the same classroom, riding the same bus, eating the same meal. These days blur, their edges dissolving, until you struggle to recall anything specific. It's as if time itself was stolen, erased, lost to the dull churn of normalcy. This isn't just nostalgia, it's neuroscience. Our brains encode new and intense experiences differently from ordinary ones. When you encounter novelty, the brain's hippocampus and amygdala light up, snapping to attention, writing each detail into long-term storage. You remember the firsts, the first time you move away from home, the first heartbreak, the first breathtaking view from a mountaintop, because your mind marks them as significant, storing every sensation. But the routines, the repetitions, the countless days spent on autopilot, the brain, ever efficient, sees no reason to waste energy preserving them. And so they fade, vanishing into the haze of just another day. There is an existential pain in this. The feeling that life is slipping by unnoticed, that years pass and leave no mark, that time itself is stolen by the ordinary. We crave richness, meaning, intensity, not just for pleasure, but to anchor ourselves against the blur of forgettable days. This is why a single unforgettable event, a surprise, a tragedy, a new adventure, can break the illusion, slowing time to a crawl, giving us the sense that we're living deeply, not just existing. But this richness is a double-edged sword. Joy and wonder expand the moment, but so do pain and fear. The memory of loss or trauma stretches and deepens, echoing far beyond the moment itself. Yet even in this mirage, there is a hidden freedom. You are not powerless. You could choose, in small ways, to resist the thief of routine. Seek novelty, even in the mundane. Walk a new path home, Cook a different meal, call an old friend, read a strange book, stand barefoot in the rain. Each time you break the rhythm, you give your brain something to remember, something to stretch time, to slow it down, to make the days last. You become the author of your own memory, the curator of meaning in a world that wants you to forget. But there's another lesson, too. Emptiness isn't always the enemy. Some of life's most beautiful moments are the quiet ones. The soft repetition of a morning ritual, the gentle peace of a familiar face, the comfort of routine after chaos. Still, the danger is always there, that you will look back and find only blankness, years dissolved into nothing. That you will wake up one day with no story to tell. It is this tension, the longing for vividness and the reality of routine, that makes the memory duration mirage so haunting, so beautiful, so cruel. We're creatures who want to feel alive, who want our lives to mean something, who want the hours to count. And so we seek out the moments that matter, and we mourn the days that vanish. But perhaps the greatest peace lies in awareness itself, in noticing the mirage as it happens, in cherishing the moments of richness, yes, but also in forgiving yourself for the days that blur. Life is not meant to be a highlight reel. It is also the quiet background, the faded colors, the soft music you forget is playing. The trick is not to despair at the blur, but to awaken again and again to the miracle of memory. To choose, whenever possible, to fill your days with something worth remembering. If only a breath, a smile, a new thought, a brief look at the sky. In the end, the memory duration mirage is a gift and a warning. Time is not just what you live, but what you remember. And what you remember is what you truly lived. The event horizon freeze. Have you ever felt a moment so sharp that reality itself seemed to freeze, as if the air thickened and every second expanded into an eternity you never asked for? This isn't a movie effect. This is what happens at the edge of trauma, in a phenomenon known as the event horizon freeze. The instant something catastrophic or terrifying shatters your world, time itself changes texture. Your brain, overwhelmed, stops running in the background and starts recording everything. Every sound, every smell, the color of the sky, the twitch in someone's face, the cold grip in your own chest. Seconds stretch, refusing to move on, trapping you in an experience that seems endless even as the world outside continues. Think of the person in a car crash who swears they saw every inch of metal folding in slow motion, the windshield spiderwebbing millimeter by millimeter. Or a child lost in a crowd, heart pounding as the noise of the world drowns out everything except the fear. To the outside, it was only a few minutes. But to the one inside the freeze, it felt like hours. 1,000 tiny impressions, each burned in a memory with impossible clarity. What's truly unsettling is that this distortion is not an illusion. It's your mind's emergency protocol, a final act of self-preservation. When trauma hits, your amygdala floods your brain with stress hormones, supercharging your senses, opening the aperture wide. Every detail might be critical for survival. Your system doesn't care about comfort. It wants data, and it wants it now. That's why you remember the sound of shattering glass, but not the conversation you had 10 minutes before disaster struck. Your body, for an instant, becomes a camera with infinite shutter speed. But here's the paradox. In the event horizon freeze, you become trapped in a prison of hyper-awareness. Time does not actually pause. The clock on the wall ticks at its old, stubborn pace. But your subjective experience splits from objective time, minutes packed with memory and sensation, dense as a neutron star. This is why survivors of traumatic events so often speak of the impossible slowness of disaster. Ask anyone who's faced violence, sudden loss, or mortal fear. They will describe details so small and specific. An earring on the floor, a dog barking down the street, the taste of adrenaline in their mouth. Their brains, in survival mode, become archivists of agony. What does this mean for our lives, for our memories, for the way we tell our stories? Trauma alters the fabric of memory itself. Unlike a pleasant day at the park, which blurs into a montage of colors and warmth. A traumatic moment is encoded as a series of razor-sharp snapshots. These are not just stories you tell yourself later. They're neurological imprints, burned in because your mind was desperate to remember, to survive, to make sense of chaos. There's a tragic beauty in this mechanism. It's a reminder that, at our most vulnerable, we become the most alive, the most awake to the world, even as pain tries to hollow us out. Picture the soldier under fire, remembering the specific smell of mud in the trenches, or the woman in a hospital room, staring at the pattern of tiles on the ceiling while her world falls apart. The event horizon freeze is merciless, yes, but it is also a testament to the mind's power, a final stand against meaninglessness. Let's go even deeper. Have you noticed how, after trauma, time can fracture permanently? Some people become stuck in that moment, their inner clocks rewinding to replay the same horror again and again. Post-traumatic stress isn't just about fear, it's about being caught in a temporal loop. The event horizon freeze doesn't always melt away. It can become a chronic condition where fragments of that slow-motion disaster invade your sleep, your quiet moments, your ordinary days. The present becomes haunted by the past because your mind has not let go of those hyper-detailed impressions. But why does the freeze happen to begin with? Evolution carved this feature into us for a reason. In the wild, noticing the twitch of a predator's muscle or the flick of a snake's tongue could be the difference between life and death. Our ancestors needed to be able to process vast amounts of sensory information in an instant and act accordingly. We are built to freeze, to focus, to encode everything when crisis hits. The cruel twist is that in the modern world, this ancient gift can become a curse, because the threats we face now are not always things we can fight or flee. Sometimes the danger is emotional, existential, or invisible, and the freeze becomes a scar rather than a shield. Yet, this experience is not universal. Some people, for reasons science is still unraveling, find that trauma makes time vanish completely. Instead of slow motion, they remember only the before and after, a blackout where the mind refuses to record, perhaps despair itself. This, too, is an act of protection, a different kind of event horizon. Either way, trauma rewrites the script of time, reminding us that our experience of life is not objective, not linear, not fair. Examples of the event horizon freeze are everywhere once you begin to look. The athlete about to lose a championship remembers every bead of sweat in the final moments. The witness to an accident can recite details that defy logic. Even in moments of joy, such as a proposal or the birth of a child, people describe time expanding, every second radiant and slow. But pain and fear are the masters of this distortion, because our minds are wired to privilege survival above all. In this way, trauma becomes both a thief and a teacher. It steals our comfort, our sense of security, our normal relationship with time. But it also gives us a kind of X-ray vision, an ability to see life in its rawest form, to notice what we would otherwise miss. There's a strange, unwanted wisdom in remembering too much, in being unable to escape the prison of a single, frozen moment. To live through the event horizon freeze is to walk at the edge of what it means to be human, to feel, against your will, just how fragile and precious time really is. For some, healing begins with the acceptance that the freeze happened, not with erasing it, but with weaving it into the tapestry of your life. You are not just the seconds of pain, but also the millions of moments that came before and after. The freeze does not define you, even as it marks you. And slowly, over years, the sharpness of the memory can soften, the colors fade, and you learn to move forward, not because the past is gone, but because you have survived it. Every person who lives through the event horizon freeze carries an invisible badge, a testament to the mind's wild, mysterious power to bend time and survive the impossible. So, the next time you hear someone say that trauma changed them, remember, it's not just an emotional statement. It's a literal truth. Their sense of time, memory, and self was forever altered at the edge of the event horizon, where pain paused the world just long enough to leave a mark no clock can measure. And in that mark, for better or worse, is the story of how we all endure. The routine time compression. At first, you don't notice it. The way days begin to shrink. How weeks collapse into single sentences. You wake up, check your phone, go to work, eat, sleep, and then it's tomorrow. Again and again, until your memory becomes a hallway with blank walls. Nothing distinct, nothing new. Just the echo of footsteps that sound eerily like yesterday's. This is the routine time compression, a slow erosion of time perception caused not by chaos, but by sameness. When every day looks like the last, your brain stops bothering to record them. It's not time that's passing faster, it's your memory logging less. Your brain is a meaning machine. It filters what matters. And when nothing changes, when nothing surprises, it assumes nothing is worth saving. So it files your days into the same invisible folder, and that folder stays shut. That's why 3 years in a job you hated feels like 6 months, while 1 week on vacation feels like a chapter of your life. Novelty expands time. Repetition erases it. And the tragedy is you don't even realize it's happening until a year disappears. You look back and think, where did the time go? But time didn't go anywhere. You did. You moved through it. You breathed every second of it. But your mind, starved of variation, compressed those moments into a flat timeline. Like a digital file, it shrunk the past to save space. And what you're left with is the illusion that life slipped past you. It didn't. You just weren't there for it. This isn't just poetic metaphor. It's how memory works. Events that stand out, first risks, emotions, get etched deeply. But the ordinary? It gets smoothed like footprints on a well-worn trail. The more predictable your routine, the less your hippocampus activates. It's not alert. It's not cataloging. It's on autopilot. And autopilot is how time vanishes. Think of your childhood. Summers felt endless. A single afternoon could hold stories, disasters, laughter, discovery. Why? Because everything was new. Every tree was a mystery. Every question mattered. You were present. Your brain was recording like a documentary crew. But now, you walk to the same desk, sit in the same chair, eat the same meals, talk about the same things. And your mind says, we've done this before. So it stops remembering. And what's not remembered is lost. This is why you can live a decade and feel like it flew. You weren't idle. You were just too consistent, too safe, too structured. You created a life without landmarks. And without landmarks, the mind sees only distance, not detail. But here's the cruel twist. Routine isn't always bad. It gives stability, predictability. It makes space for peace. But unchecked, it becomes a fog. A time-slowing mist that doesn't make you suffer, just vanish. You become a ghost in your own life, present, but barely. And it doesn't take catastrophe to wake you up. Just contrast. The day you move to a new city. The moment you fall in love. The day everything changes, you suddenly feel awake. Time stretches again. Seconds feel full. Why? Because your brain is watching again. Alert. Engaged. Recording. But if you don't chase contrast deliberately, life doesn't give it freely. And so, many live quietly inside a loop. Not because they're lazy or lost, but because modern life rewards repetition. It calls it discipline. It disguises it as success. Wake up, grind, deliver, sleep, repeat. And the soul agrees until it realizes it hasn't felt anything in months. Routine time compression is not about laziness. It's about unnoticed drift. It's the clock moving while your awareness stands still. You show up every day, but nothing sticks. And years later, you look at a photo and feel the eerie emptiness of not remembering the day it was taken. So how do you fight it? Not by quitting your life, but by inserting deliberate novelty. A different route to work, a walk in silence, a meal in solitude, a hard conversation, a spontaneous risk, anything that makes the brain feel, that makes it say, this matters. Remember this. It doesn't need to be dramatic, just different enough to spark attention. Because attention is the currency of time. You don't measure life in hours. You measure it in vividness, in memory. And without presence, time is not just short, it's missing. Think about this. If your next 10 years are exactly like your last 10, how much of them will you actually remember? Will they be lived or just endured? Will your timeline be marked by moments or just mileage? You deserve to remember your life. You deserve to feel the stretch of time again, not just its vanishing. You deserve days that imprint, not just pass. And it starts by breaking one small pattern, not to destroy the routine, but to remind the brain to care. Because once it does, time opens up, the fog lifts, and suddenly you're here again, fully, deeply, living, not looping. The future delay illusion. There's a haunting mirage that follows us through life, a trick of the mind, a promise always just beyond reach. You tell yourself, not today, soon, when things calm down, when I have more time, more courage, more clarity, then I'll begin. The right moment is coming. You picture a future where everything lines up, where the way forward is clear, the obstacles are gone, and you finally become who you know you're meant to be. But the days pass, then weeks, then years, and the better time remains a shimmering illusion on the horizon. This is the future delay illusion, a trap where action is always postponed, and life itself is lived as an endless prelude, a tomorrow that never quite arrives. You wake up each morning in the grip of possibility, burdened by tasks left undone, dreams deferred, changes you know you need to make. But there's always a reason to wait. Not enough money, not enough energy, too much risk, too much noise. You build a mythology around readiness, a faith in the someday that feels both responsible and hopeful. Yet behind the curtain, fear lingers. What if you try and fail? What if you start and realize you are not enough? What if the change you want is not as safe as the pain you know? The mind loves safety, and nothing is safer than a tomorrow that never comes. Imagine futures are gentle. They don't make demands. They don't judge or disappoint or expose you to the sting of failure. The real world, by contrast, is hard and messy and full of risk. It's easier to plan, to rehearse, to research every angle rather than act. You convince yourself you're being wise, patient, mature. But inside, the voice of urgency begins to ache. You sense the cost of delay, the silent erosion of potential, the slow, invisible leak of vitality. Each day you don't begin, your dream slips one step further into the realm of fantasy. Think about the promises you've made to yourself. I'll start writing my book next month. I'll leave this job when things are more stable. I'll speak my truth when the time is right. You replay these scripts like lullabies, soothing yourself into inertia. You become trapped in an eternal rehearsal, an endless warm-up act for the life you wish you were living. In the meantime, the world moves on. Opportunities vanish. People change. You change. The stage you were waiting to step onto is dismantled before you ever find your cue. There's a quiet tragedy in living this way. The days feel safe but empty, ordered but unfulfilled. You become an expert at prelude, a master of anticipation, but a stranger to arrival. Even small risks, making a call, taking a class, telling someone how you feel, are endlessly deferred. Later becomes your mantra, someday your shield. But the better time never comes, because the only time you ever truly possess is now. Somewhere deep inside, you know this. You feel the weight of waiting, the tension between desire and hesitation. Sometimes a shock breaks the spell, a loss, a diagnosis, a sudden reminder that time is not infinite and that life does not owe you a single perfect moment. In these flashes, you see the illusion for what it is, a prison made of good intentions and gentle lies. You realize that the only escape is action, messy, imperfect, immediate. The Stoics warned against this very trap. They taught that we suffer not from the things we do, but from the things we endlessly delay. They urged us to seize the moment, to begin before we are ready, to step forward while fear is still whispering. Because action is the only thing that brings tomorrow into the light of today. Every meaningful change, every book written, every love confessed, every new path carved, began not when the time was perfect, but when someone refused to wait any longer. It is not bravery, that separates the fulfilled from the unfulfilled, but the willingness to act in the midst of uncertainty. To start small, to risk stumbling, to say yes before you have every answer. The better time is not coming. There's only this breath, this hour, this trembling choice in the face of doubt. Your future is not waiting for you to become ready. It is waiting for you to show up. Imagine the life you could have if you stopped delaying, if you traded the safety of prelude for the honesty of action. Imagine the stories you would gather, the growth you would earn, the peace that comes from knowing you're not just dreaming, but living. The world belongs to those who dare to begin, even when their hearts are pounding, even when their hands shake, even when everything inside them screams for more time. So the next time you hear the promise of a better time, pause. Look at your hands, your day, your life as it is. Ask yourself, what would happen if I began now? Not perfectly, not with certainty, but with all the truth I have. Let the future delay illusion dissolve in the light of presence. Let action shatter the endless prelude. Step forward, awkward, brave, unfinished, and watch as imagined tomorrows finally become today's reality. The reverse memory bias, time, in memory, is not a straight road. It's a tangled forest where events don't live where they once did. Sometimes a heartbreak from 10 years ago feels like yesterday. Sometimes last year feels like a lifetime ago. You remember that conversation, that smile, that mistake, but where it belongs in your life. That's where the mind begins to lie. This is the reverse memory bias, a silent distortion that warps your internal calendar, reshuffling the past like a messy drawer until emotion, not chronology, decides what feels recent and what fades. You don't just forget. You reorganize, and you don't even know you're doing it. You might swear that a trip happened just a few years ago, only to check the photos and realize it was nearly a decade back. Or you believe a wound has had time to scar, yet the moment you think about it, it bleeds again as if it never left. It's not because the facts are lost. It's because the emotions still echo, so your brain rewrites the timeline to match their volume. The mind doesn't store memories in sequence. It sorts them by meaning, pain, joy, regret. And the stronger the emotion, the closer the memory feels. Not as feels. That's why grief can stretch. A single event from years ago can feel more recent than last week's lunch. Your ex-lover's goodbye might feel closer than your graduation. A betrayal from childhood can suddenly rise in your chest as if it just happened yesterday. Because to your brain, it kind of did. The neural pathway reopened. The emotion lit the fuse again, and your timeline bent to let it in. This isn't just forgetfulness. It's cognitive survival. Your mind reshuffles the past, not to deceive, but to protect. Sometimes it pulls old pain closer, so you don't repeat a mistake. Sometimes it pushes joy farther away to keep you from lingering too long in nostalgia. Either way, you lose clarity. And that costs you, because you begin to misjudge how long healing really took, or how long you've been stuck. You think, I should be over this by now, not realizing that your brain has been dragging the memory closer every time you touch it. Or you believe a good moment happened too long ago to count, not realizing your mind banished it not by time, but by emotion. This bias doesn't just distort your past. It rewrites your emotional map, your sense of how far you've come or how far you haven't. It tells you stories like, you've always been like this, when the truth is, you changed. You grew. But those distant memories were pushed so far back, you can't feel the steps anymore. Or worse, it tells you, you were happy just yesterday, when that joy actually lived years ago, and you've been quietly sinking ever since. Memory is not a file. It's not digital. It's a living narrative. And like all stories, it gets edited, cleaned, rearranged. The villain becomes a victim. The victory gets smaller. The silence becomes louder. In time, the order of it all becomes optional. Even sensory triggers become unreliable. A song plays, and you're sure it came out when you were 18. But you were 25. A certain smell hits you, and your body reacts before your mind can remember what it meant. It feels like it happened in a different year, but your calendar disagrees. The reverse memory bias works like gravity, subtle, invisible, constant, pulling pieces of your past out of orbit and setting them somewhere new. And yet, we build our identities on memory. We say, I've always been this way, or I changed after that moment, without realizing that the timeline we trust has been edited by emotion. So how much of who you think you are is built on misfiled memories? How much of your regret, your guilt, your pride, comes from events that your mind quietly moved? How many times did you judge yourself for taking too long to move on, when your brain kept replaying the moment in a loop that made it feel like last week? The danger is not just in forgetting. It's in the illusion of remembering accurately. That's the trap. That's what makes the reverse memory bias so quietly cruel. You think you're just reflecting, but you're not looking through a window. You're looking through warped glass. And it's not your fault. Memory is not truth. It's impression. It's residue. It's shaped not just by what happened, but by how you felt about what happened and how you feel now about who you were then. That's why healing is confusing. Some days the pain feels ancient. Other days it crashes into you like it never left. The scar shifts time zones. The wound relocates. And the joy, that shifts too. The happy moments you once held close can drift so far away you start to doubt if they ever happened at all. But they did. You live them. You just misplaced them. So what do? We stop trusting memory like a map and start treating it like weather. Fleeting, shifting, real, but not reliable. We honor the feelings that return, but we also question their placement. We ask, is this pain recent or just rehearsed? Is this joy gone or just hidden? The reverse memory bias doesn't mean your memories are worthless. It means they're alive. And just like you, they change. So when your mind tells you that something is still fresh, pause. Ask if it's fresh or just present. Ask if you've truly made no progress, or if progress just landed out of reach on a mental timeline you no longer control. The past is not fixed. It's fluid, but so is your future. And if you can learn to hold memory lightly, not as proof, but as a poem, you can finally stop chasing ghosts and start living here. Now, in the only moment that won't shift beneath your feet, the flashbulb falls slow down. There's a trick the mind plays in moments of shock, a strange illusion that turns seconds into eternity and memory into myth. You know the feeling: a car screeches, a glass shatters, an unexpected phone call breaks the air, and suddenly everything slows. Colors seem sharper, sounds stretch and echo. Your thoughts fire off one by one, as if you have all the time in the world to react. In the aftermath, you swear it happened in slow motion. But the truth is stranger still. The slowness you remember was never real. It is a lie your mind tells later. A story stitched from the fragments of chaos. A desperate attempt to make sense of the unthinkable. This is the flashbulb fall slowdown. A phenomenon where memory tricks you into believing the worst moments of your life lasted longer than they did. The crash, the scream, the pivotal instant. These are burned into your mind with impossible clarity. But during the moment itself, you didn't really experience time slowing. There was no secret pause, no magical expansion. You lived the seconds as quickly as everyone else. The slow motion effect is an illusion, a shadow cast backwards by memory, not a mirror of reality. Why does this happen? The answer is both psychological and deeply human. When something shocking occurs, your brain is jolted in a high alert. The amygdala, your mind's fire alarm, goes off, flooding your body with adrenaline, sharpening your senses, forcing you to take in more detail than you ever thought possible. Every sight, sound, smell, and sensation is imprinted with almost photographic precision. Your brain, working overtime, gathers far more information than usual in a short burst of time. Later, when you look back, you have more memories packed into a single moment than your mind is used to holding. The result? The memory seems to stretch. It feels slow, impossibly vivid, each fraction of a second stuffed with detail. But the slowness is a retrospective illusion, a trick played by the brain, not a lived experience. In the heat of the moment, there is no leisurely pause, no ability to act with deliberate calm. Instead, You're moving on instinct, thoughts flickering too fast to grasp, body moving almost before you realize what's happening. The slow motion you remember is constructed after the fact, a film reel edited for drama, not a documentary of what you truly experienced. Consider the moments that changed you. An accident, a fall, a devastating announcement. The instant you realize something irreversible was happening. You remember every heartbeat, every look, the way the light hit the room, the sound of your own breath. It feels as if you had time to notice everything, to think through all the possibilities, to make a choice. But what you actually lived was a blur of sensation, a jolt of reaction. Only in the retelling do the seconds expand. This illusion is not just a curiosity. It is a testament to the power and unreliability of memory. It reminds us that what we remember is not always what was. The mind is a storyteller, not a tape recorder. It weaves significance into chaos, finding patterns where there were only flashes. The false slowdown comforts us with the idea that we had some measure of control, that we could have acted differently. That time gave us a chance to save ourselves or someone else. But this, too, is a story, a necessary fiction we use to survive the aftershocks of trauma. There is a strange mercy in the mind's lie. The illusion of slow motion gives us a frame to hold on to when everything else was slipping away. It lets us revisit, re-experience, and perhaps in the retelling heal. But it can also become a burden, a source of guilt, of second-guessing, of endless regret. Why didn't I do more? Why didn't I see it coming? Why did time slow for me, but not for others? The answer is simple. It didn't. The moment was as fast and merciless for you as for anyone. The slow motion is the afterimage, not the event itself. If you look deeper, you can see how this illusion touches every life. From the witness to a disaster, to the survivor of heartbreak, to the person who stands stunned in the face of loss. Each of us has felt the phantom slow motion, the sense that everything was suspended, held, magnified. And yet, what really happened was a blur, an instant, a moment gone before you could name it. Knowing this truth does not diminish the power of your memory. It makes it more poignant. It reminds you to treat your recollections with both awe and caution, to understand that your mind is both a witness and a creator, forever rewriting what was with what you needed to survive. The flashbulb false slowdown is not failure. It is a miracle of adaptation, a way to survive the unbearable, to make sense of the unthinkable. So the next time you remember a moment that felt like it stretched forever, remember, the slowness is a story, not a fact. It is your mind's gift and your mind's illusion. Cherish the clarity, but do not be haunted by what you think you missed. The truth is you lived it as it was fast, fleeting, wild. And that is enough. The mind can only do what it must to help you hold on. The anticipation time stretch. There's a peculiar cruelty built into the fabric of human experience. The way anticipation can bend time, stretching minutes into hours, hours into eternity. You know the feeling. Waiting for exam results, a job interview, a message from someone who matters. You pace, you stare at the clock, and each tick becomes a thunderclap in a silent room. This is the anticipation time stretch, a phenomenon as universal as breath, yet as personal as your own heartbeat. It begins with a sense of expectation. Something important is coming. Your mind, hungry for certainty, refuses to sit still. It leaps ahead, rehearsing futures that haven't arrived. What if the news is bad? What if it's good? What will you say? How will you feel? What will change? Instead of living in the present, your thoughts spiral outward, painting vivid pictures of things that don't yet exist. In doing so, your brain traps you in a feedback loop, a simulation of reality that feels as real as the event itself. The science behind this torment is fascinating. The human brain is a prediction machine, wired for survival in a world of uncertainty. It constantly models possibilities, calculating risks and rewards, searching for patterns in chaos. When you anticipate something, especially something uncertain or emotionally charged, your brain ramps up this simulation process. Cortisol, the stress hormone, floods your system. Your senses sharpen. You become hyper-aware of your environment, scanning for signs, clues, anything that might resolve the suspense. But because the event hasn't happened yet, there's nothing for your mind to land on. So it circles again and again, chewing over possibilities, refusing to settle. Time itself becomes a casualty. The more you want the moment to arrive, the slower it seems to crawl. You're caught in a psychological paradox. The harder you look, the farther away it seems. It's why children waiting for Christmas morning swear that the night lasts forever. Why someone waiting for a loved one to return home counts each second as a separate agony. We've all lived it, waiting for the doctor to call with results. The minutes drag, heavy and thick, your imagination amplifying every possible outcome. Waiting backstage before performance, heartbeat pounding so loud you wonder if the audience can hear it too. The anticipation inflates every second, stretching the gap between now and then into something almost unbearable. The irony is that nothing in the external world has changed. Time hasn't slowed, the clock hasn't broken. But inside your mind, the narrative explodes into slow motion, filling the space with endless rehearsals and restless visions. Sometimes, the anticipation is laced with hope. The night before a long-awaited trip, your mind floods with images, suitcases packed, plane tickets double-checked, new places waiting just beyond sunrise. You can't sleep, not because you're anxious, but because excitement itself becomes a force that stretches time. You live through the trip a dozen times before it even begins. This is the brain's attempt to prepare for every possible detail, to reduce the unknown to something you can grasp. But in doing so, it robs you of the present moment, casting you into a liminal space where time loses meaning. Other times, anticipation is pure dread. The looming deadline, the difficult conversation, the possibility of loss. You run scenarios in your head, over and over, trying to brace yourself for pain or disappointment. In these moments, the anticipation time stretch can feel like a form of psychological torture. You're not in danger yet, but your body reacts as if you are, adrenaline leaking into your veins, your breath growing shallow, your focus narrowing to a single, unavoidable point in the future. Even in the most mundane situations, this phenomenon shapes our lives. Standing in a slow-moving line at the grocery store, sitting in traffic, the red light refusing to change, refreshing your inbox, waiting for an important reply. In all these cases, your mind refuses to accept the simplicity of waiting. It demands action, resolution, movement. Deprived of these, it turns on itself, replaying the waiting, amplifying impatience, making a few minutes feel like a lifetime. The anticipation time stretch is not just a trick of perception. It's a reflection of the brain's deepest programming. We are built to anticipate, to prepare, to strategize. In prehistoric times, this ability to foresee danger or opportunity was a matter of life and death. Now, in a world filled with uncertainties, it can feel like a curse, chaining us to futures that may never arrive. But this is also why we dream, why we hope, why we plan. The agony of anticipation is the shadow side of possibility, the price we pay for living in a mind that refuses to wait quietly. Consider, too, how anticipation can become addictive. Some people crave the feeling of the unknown, the thrill of waiting for results, the electric buzz of an uncertain outcome. The brain releases dopamine not just when we receive a reward, but in the build-up before it. The waiting itself becomes charged with potential, sometimes more exciting than the result. This is why cliffhangers work, why suspense keeps us glued to a story, why hope can sometimes feel sweeter than fulfillment. Yet, there's a lesson hidden in this strange expansion of time. When anticipation becomes overwhelming, it's a signal from your mind. Pay attention. Something matters deeply to you. The stretch, uncomfortable as it is, reveals the depth of your longing, your fear, your desire. It reminds you that you are alive, tethered to a world that is always just out of reach, a future that refuses to arrive on your schedule. If you find yourself trapped in the anticipation time stretch, remember that you are not alone. It is not a flaw, but a feature of being human. The mind, restless and imaginative, will always try to leap ahead, to know, to control. But sometimes, the greatest relief comes from surrender, accepting that the future is out of your hands, that time will move at its own pace, that you are allowed to return to the present, even for a breath. In that breath, the world stops spinning. The future waits quietly, and you remember, for just a moment, that anticipation is a thread woven through every story you've ever loved, every goal you've ever chased, every fear you've ever faced. Time may stretch and bend under the weight of waiting, but it never truly breaks. And when the awaited moment finally arrives, it almost always comes faster than you expected, leaving you changed, relieved, and a little wiser for having survived the long, slow hours before. Because to anticipate is to be human. To stretch time with hope, with fear, with longing, is to live at the edge of what comes next. And in those long, restless minutes, we discover both the limits and the miracles of our own restless minds. The retrospective shrinkage glitch. Have you ever looked back on a chapter of your life? A relationship you thought would define you forever, a journey that seemed endless, or a job that consumed your every waking hour, and been shocked at how small it now feels in memory? It's almost as if your own past, which once stretched out ahead of you like an infinite highway, has compressed itself into a brief flash. Moments you thought you'd never escape are now reduced to flickering scenes, quick dissolves between more pressing chapters. This is the retrospective shrinkage glitch, a subtle, invisible glitch in the way human memory edits the passage of time and warps the emotional gravity of our experiences. At the heart of it is a simple, haunting paradox. When you are inside an experience, especially one charged with emotion, time feels swollen, heavy, impossible to carry. You count the days, the weeks, the years. You wonder if this will ever end, or if it will become the permanent architecture of your existence. Lovers whisper promises beneath stars, believing the moment is eternal. The exhausted commuter on the train feels their daily grind will stretch on forever. The student cramming for exams, the parent raising a child, the traveler stranded between distant cities, each is swallowed by the illusion of endlessness. But step outside. Months or years later, look back. Suddenly, all that emotional weight collapses into a single blink. That relationship, so suffocating or so intoxicating, is now just a page in your story. That journey, once an odyssey, is a handful of snapshots, scattered images disconnected from the storm of feeling you once knew. The job that once consumed you with anxiety, urgency, or meaning now seems like a strange dream you can barely reconstruct. Why does memory do this to us? Why do we feel so deeply while living, only for it to shrink into a compact, almost unrecognizable artifact as we move on? The answer lies in the way the brain stores and retrieves experience. While we live through an event, our brains are constantly encoding every detail, especially if the experience is emotionally charged. When you're in love, heartbroken, overwhelmed, or terrified, your mind is flooded with sensations, thoughts, and feelings. Every day is a new collection of stories, a rush of internal weather. But as time passes, memory simplifies. It does not record every second. It records turning points, emotional peaks, moments of transition. It smooths out the daily repetition, stitches together what stands out, and discards the rest. What once felt like an endless tapestry is edited into a montage, a trailer for the movie of your life, instead of the full, immersive film you once inhabited. Take a relationship. While living it, each day has its own temperature. The shared breakfasts, the late-night arguments, the thousand small rituals. At the time, it's everything. Years later, you may only remember the beginning, the end, and a handful of moments when something shifted, the night you laughed until you cried, the fight that changed everything, the goodbye you swore you'd never say. The daily texture, the slow passing of ordinary time, vanishes. It's as if your memory has compacted years into minutes. Or think about a journey. The long train rides, the waiting at airports, the endless stretches of boredom and anticipation. These dominate your mind as you travel. But when you look back, all that remains are the highlights. The first sight of a new city, the friend you made, the meal you'll never forget. The journey itself, which felt so vast and consuming, shrinks into a tiny jewel in the jewelry box of your memory. Jobs are the same. The stress, the deadlines, the small daily dramas, all consuming while you are there. But leave, and the details evaporate. You remember a few key projects, the day you quit, the colleague who changed your life. Years of daily effort are reduced to a couple of sentences, a feeling, a blurry sense of who you were then. This is not a bug. It's a feature of the mind, a survival mechanism. If we remembered every detail with full intensity, the past would paralyze us. So the brain edits. It keeps what matters, lets the rest dissolve. But there's a cost. We misjudge the scale of our own lives. The pain that seemed endless, the love that felt infinite, the boredom that felt terminal. These all shrink, sometimes so much that we question whether we ever felt them at all. The retrospective shrinkage glitch explains why nostalgia can be so misleading. Looking back, you may wonder why you made such a big deal out of something that now feels so small. You may question your own emotions. Were they even real? But you were not wrong to feel so deeply. It's just that memory is a master editor, ruthless in its compression, stripping out everything but the highlights, the transitions, the things it thinks you'll need to remember to survive. This glitch also explains why it's so hard to empathize with people currently living through experiences you've already outgrown. You may urge a friend to move on from heartbreak, forgetting how infinite your own pain once felt. You may minimize someone's struggle in a job or a place you've long since left behind. Our memories make us strangers to our own suffering, sometimes leaving us less compassionate than we should be. Yet, there's also hope in this glitch. It means that no matter how eternal your suffering feels now, it will shrink. The grief that engulfs you today may, in time, become a single shimmering tear on the horizon of your past. The anxiety you feel every day will blur and fade. You will forget, not because your pain was small, but because your brain is merciful enough to let go of its full weight. What is unbearable now will, in the future, seem brief, almost gentle, like a ghost of what you once survived. And there's a strange kind of freedom in this. Knowing the retrospective shrinkage glitch is real allows you to endure the present with a little more courage. The storm you're in will not last forever. One day, it will be just another story you tell, another chapter you can close, another eternity shrunk down to a blink. Memory is always editing, always smoothing, always shrinking even the biggest events until they fit inside you, so you can keep moving forward. So, when you find yourself overwhelmed by the endlessness of now, remember, your mind is already preparing to make this bearable, already planning to turn today's epic into tomorrow's footnote. This is not a betrayal of your experience. It's an act of protection. You are built to survive the long haul, not to drown in every wave. The retrospective shrinkage glitch is the mind's quiet mercy, the reason you can grow, forgive, move on, and keep finding new stories to live. Because what once felt eternal will always, in the end, become a blink, a single, softened moment in the endless stretch of your life. The boredom time expansion. There are moments when a single minute feels like a punishment. You stare at the ceiling. You scroll mindlessly. You wait for a message, a train, a change, and time becomes thick, almost hostile. It doesn't move forward. It lingers, drags, expands, as if your brain, confronted with stagnation, begins to distort the clock just to remind you that nothing is happening. This is the boredom time expansion, a strange, internal protest against stillness, where time doesn't fly. It crawls, painfully slow. But here's the paradox. In memory, these stretched-out moments vanish. You feel them vividly while they happen. But once they're gone, they leave no mark. Boredom inflates time in the present and erases it in the past. And that makes it one of the most deceptive tricks the mind plays. You suffer now, but remember nothing later. This isn't about laziness. It's about sensory starvation. Your brain is built for stimulation, for pattern recognition, for narrative and novelty. And when it receives none, when there is no challenge, no emotion, no interruption, it revolts. It stretches each moment like taffy, makes you feel every heartbeat, every tick of the second hand, until time itself becomes unbearable. That's why sitting in a waiting room for 10 minutes can feel longer than an hour of conversation with someone you love. Why staring at a blank wall seems longer than walking through a forest. Why the final 5 minutes before a meeting, or a class, or a flight feel longer than the event itself. Because your brain has no story to tell. And in the absence of story, it magnifies time. There's science beneath the suffering. In boredom, your brain's internal clock, regulated in part by the basal ganglia and dopamine systems, begins to fire differently. Without stimulation, fewer temporal markers are created. But because your attention is trapped in the present, each second feels raw, unbuffered, unprocessed. You are hyper-aware of how long things are taking. Not because they actually take longer, but because you have nothing else to think about. It's the inverse of the flow state. In flow, you forget time because you're immersed. In boredom, you're painfully aware of time because you're detached. You're not in the moment. You're stuck in it. And that creates a subtle kind of existential panic. Because boredom isn't just stillness. It's meaningless stillness. Your brain craves movement, but there's nowhere to go. So it rebels. Not with noise, but with time distortion. That's why prisoners often describe the worst part of incarceration not as pain or fear, but the unrelenting stretch of time. It's why children cry on long car rides. Why solitary confinement breaks people. It's not the silence. It's the expansion. The unbearable elongation of nothingness. The slow drip of minutes that won't die. But boredom isn't always passive. Sometimes it's a mirror, a cruel one. It shows you the gap between what you're doing and what you could be doing. It exposes the void, the disconnection between action and desire. It whispers, you are wasting something precious. And that's when the seconds become heavier, because you start measuring not just the time you're losing, but the life you're not living. This is why modern boredom hurts more than ever. In a world wired for stimulation, where every second could be filled with sound, color, content, we feel even more agitated when nothing grabs us. Our threshold for stillness has collapsed. And so, the moment silence arrives, we panic. Not out loud. Internally, we feel abandoned by time itself. But there's another dimension here, because while boredom expands time in the moment, it also compresses it in hindsight. You may feel like a day dragged forever, but when you look back, it feels like it never happened. That's the cruel twist. Boredom stretches the now, but erases the then. You feel like you're stuck in eternity, only to later find a hole in your timeline, a blank space where your life should have been. So what do we do with this? We can't outrun boredom, but we can understand it. We can learn that boredom isn't just an enemy. It's a signal, a red flag. Not that something is wrong with the world, but that something is misaligned within us. That our attention has nowhere meaningful to land. That our energy is circling without direction. And that unless we act, time will continue to stretch and then vanish. Sometimes that action is simple. Not entertainment, not distraction, but engagement, attention. Even the smallest act, writing, drawing, movement, conversation, can break the spell. Because the spell isn't about having nothing to do. It's about feeling disconnected from doing anything that matters. Boredom tells you that you've lost emotional friction with the present, that the moment has nothing to offer. But the truth is, it does. You've just lost the ability to see it. So the next time you feel time stretch unbearably, don't just reach for distraction. Ask what it's telling you. Ask what it wants from you. Ask what it's showing you about the life you've built and the moments you're skipping. Because time will pass, whether you feel it or not, whether it stretches or vanishes. But meaning, that's your part. That's what brings time back into shape. Not the hours you count, but the life you feel inside them. The dopamine time-stop effect. There's a kind of magic that happens when joy hits, an alchemy of mind and body, a bright eruption in the darkness of routine. In these moments, when excitement or reward surges through your veins, time itself seems to bend and vanish. The hours dissolve, the seconds evaporate, and all that's left is the pulse of the present, loud and bright and overwhelming. It's as if your mind, drunk on dopamine, simply skips over the intervals between joys, leaving you with a blank you only notice afterward, when the excitement fades and ordinary time resumes. We've all felt it. The way a night with friends becomes a blur of laughter and stories, the clock moving impossibly fast, the evening gone before you can count the minutes. Or the flow of creative work, when you're so absorbed in the task that you look up and realize whole hours have vanished. The first rush of falling in love, the thrill of winning, the moment your favorite song drops, all become time machines, catapulting you across hours or even days in what feels like a single, breathless instant. This is the dopamine time-stop effect. It's not just a trick of perception, but a deep, chemical shift in your brain. When you experience pleasure or anticipation, your brain floods with dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward, motivation, and delight. This surge doesn't just make you feel good. It changes the way you experience reality. The circuits responsible for tracking time quiet down, background noise falls away, and only the highlight remains. You don't notice time passing because your mind is busy recording the peaks, skipping the valleys, living entirely in the crest of the wave. Afterward, as the moment ends, there's a strange sense of loss. The night is over. The game is finished. The song ends. You check the time, startled to realize how much has disappeared. You try to reconstruct where the hours went, but there are blanks, intervals unaccounted for, sensations unrecorded. All that remains is the feeling, the afterglow, the impression of having traveled through time without touching down. There's a bittersweetness in this effect. While you're inside the dopamine rush, you are utterly present, untethered from worry, doubt, or monotony. But in retrospect, you realize how much you missed. The spaces between, the texture of each passing minute, the subtleties lost to the brightness of joy. It's as if your mind lights up the mountaintops and leaves the valleys in shadow, creating a memory that is vivid but incomplete. This effect can be intoxicating, even addictive. You begin to chase those moments when time seems to vanish, seeking out excitement, reward, stimulation. You crave the feeling of timelessness, the escape from ordinary life. The risk is that in seeking only the peaks, you lose the ability to sit with the quiet, to savor the slow unfolding of ordinary time. Life becomes a series of bright flashes separated by blanks, a slideshow, not a film. But there is also a lesson hidden here, a reminder about the nature of joy and presence. The dopamine time-stop effect is a sign that you are fully alive, that you are capable of being swept away, of forgetting yourself in wonder. It reveals the mind's power to transcend clocks and calendars, to drop you into the flow of the moment. Yet it also asks you to remember what's lost in the rush, to notice the way memory skips, to honor both the excitement and the intervals, the fireworks and the quiet that follows. Think of the artist lost in their work, the lover tangled in the thrill of discovery, the child playing until dusk, the athlete in the zone. These are moments when time bows to joy, when dopamine sings and the world shrinks to a single, shining now. But when the song ends, you must return. You piece together the blanks. You feel the ache of time's passing. You remember that the highlight reel is not the whole story. Maybe the challenge is to welcome both, the rush of excitement and the gentler flow of ordinary minutes. To celebrate the times when joy stops the clock, but also to seek meaning in the quieter hours, to stitch together a life that is both vivid and whole. The dopamine time-stop effect reminds you that life is not just measured by how much you do, but by how deeply you are moved, how utterly you are captured by the present. So the next time you lose yourself in excitement, notice the miracle. Feel the way time vanishes. Let yourself ride the wave. But when you return, look for the spaces you skipped. Fill them with gratitude, with attention, with the gentle acceptance that even the blanks are part of the story. For it is in the interplay between joy and stillness, between fireworks and quiet, that your life becomes both unforgettable and fully lived. The dream clock confusion. Have you ever woken for a nap, heart pounding, convinced you've lived through an entire lifetime in the space of 5 minutes? Maybe you traveled across continents, fell in love, fought battles, or faced impossible choices, all before your alarm snapped you back to the blunt reality of your bedroom. You sit up, dazed, trying to make sense of how your mind built and destroyed worlds while your body barely shifted into sheets. This is the dream clock confusion, a phenomenon where time inside dreams bends, folds, and splinters, leaving your waking self baffled by the rules your brain just broke. In waking life, time is a strict ruler. Minutes march forward, never skipping, never repeating. Our days are built on this predictability. But in dreams, the clock is a trickster. Seconds can stretch into hours, and hours can collapse into a single, shimmering instant. The boundaries dissolve. Cause and effect become untethered. You might walk into a room as a child and leave as an old man. You might watch a mountain rise, erode, and vanish, all within the blink of an eye. In dreams, your mind tells stories that ignore the very laws of time itself. Why does this happen? The answer lives in the shadowy machinery of your sleeping brain. When you drift into REM sleep, the stage most associated with vivid dreaming, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and timekeeping, relaxes its grip. The brain's narrative centers take over, painting wild scenes with colors stolen from memory and imagination. Without the usual anchors, time becomes just another tool for storytelling. Your dream self might relive a whole school year in minutes or tumble through a lifetime in the pause between two alarms. Consider the classic example, the nap. You close your eyes for what feels like 5 minutes. Inside that sliver of time, you embark on an epic quest, chased by shadows, falling in love, racing against a storm, solving impossible puzzles. When you wake, your heart is pounding, your mind scrambled by the weight of what you've just experienced. You glance at your phone, shocked to see how little time has actually passed. The dream felt eternal. Reality is a letdown, smaller and more brittle than the world you just inhabited. Scientists have tried to measure dream time. Experiments with lucid dreamers, those rare people who can become aware inside their dreams, have shown that dream actions take roughly the same amount of time as waking actions. But that's just the conscious part. The vast, nonlinear landscapes of most dreams aren't bound by this logic. You might watch a child grow up in seconds, or recall relationships rise and fall in a single image. The narrative leaps, jumping over years or looping back on itself, as if time were a slideshow shuffled by a mischievous hand. This isn't just a curiosity. It's a window into how our minds process experience, memory, and desire. Dreams compress and expand time because they aren't limited by physical reality. They blend fragments from different periods of your life, a childhood home, a college friend, a recent worry, into a seamless whole. You recognize the feeling even as the details slide away upon waking. In dreams, the past, present, and future mingle freely. There is no before or after, just now, stretched and twisted until it no longer resembles the ticking of a real clock. Consider the dream where you're back in school, late for an exam, panic bubbling in your chest. You rush through halls that shift beneath your feet, meet people who morph from strangers into old friends. The scene changes without warning, a city street, then a childhood bedroom, then an endless highway. In a single dream, you might travel from youth to age and back again, all within the time it takes for your morning alarm to ring. The dream clock is not just broken. It's a Mobius strip, looping and folding in ways that waking logic cannot follow. Why do we remember dream time as so vast, even when it's squeezed into a short nap. One theory is that dreams are densely packed with narrative and emotion. Your mind doesn't just show you a scene. It makes you feel it, live inside it, fill every moment with meaning. These heightened emotions create the illusion of extended time, much like a near-death experience can make seconds feel infinite. In dreams, the mind is free from the tyranny of the second hand. It can paint a saga with a single brushstroke. But when you wake, something strange happens. Your conscious mind tries to piece together what just occurred to fit the wild, sprawling dream into the neat framework of waking time. It's like trying to fold an ocean into a teacup. The images fragment, the narrative crumbles. You remember flashes, a face, a word, a fall, but the sense of vastness lingers, an aftertaste of eternity left over from a 5-minute sleep. This confusion can be both beautiful and unsettling. It reveals just how subjective our experience of time really is. The ticking clock is a shared hallucination necessary for survival and social life. But beneath it, the mind keeps its own hours. In dreams, you live many lives, collapse centuries into seconds, expand a single heartbeat into an epic. Waking up, you're forced to return to the linear path, one foot after the other, each second accounted for. The dream clock confusion is a gentle reminder. Time is not a law, but a lens. When that lens blurs, reality expands, contracts, and shifts in ways you can only feel, never fully explain. It is why some dreams haunt you for days. Why? Even as you move through the world, you carry the weight of another life, lived in the darkness behind your eyes. It is why we can wake in tears or laughter, missing someone we never met, mourning or celebrating things that never happened outside the theater of our sleeping minds. To experience the dream clock confusion is to glimpse the strange, creative chaos at the core of being human. It is a testament to the mind's power to invent, to remember, to feel beyond the boundaries of reality. And though you may never be able to measure or retell the full expanse of your dream time, you carry its echoes within you, a reminder that, in a world behind your eyes, time is never just a line. It is a storm, a spiral, a secret universe where the rules slip and dissolve, and you are free to be lost and found, over and over, in the space between two heartbeats. The nostalgia lag phenomenon. You remember the past in slow motion. Not because it was slower, but because it feels slower. Time seemed fuller then, thicker, softer around the edges. You recall the light through a window, the rhythm of laughter, the sound of your own footsteps in places that no longer exist. But the strangest part? Those moments felt ordinary when they happened. Only now do they shimmer. This is the nostalgia lag phenomenon, a peculiar distortion where looking back slows time down there while speeding it up here. The past blooms, the present blurs, and so you begin to mourn not just what was, but how it felt. This isn't some poetic illusion. It's a neurological phenomenon. Your brain records novelty, not repetition. And the past, especially childhood or youth, is a field of firsts. First love, first rebellion, first heartbreak, first freedom. It was vivid, textured, lived with open eyes. So when you revisit it, your mind plays it back in rich detail, like a film you didn't know you were directing. But here's the trap. Because the past feels slow and deep, the present, by comparison, feels rushed and shallow. You look back and think, life used to be better, when in truth, life used to be noticed more. Not because you were more grateful, but because you were more present. You hadn't yet built routines thick enough to make entire months disappear. You hadn't yet trained your attention to skip over the now. So when you revisit old memories, they move slowly because your mind is uncompressing them, layer by layer, texture by texture, like unfolding a painting from storage. But when you turn back to the present, it races. Your attention snaps back to bills, emails, traffic, scrolling, and time collapses again. That's the lag. The emotional dissonance between the slow warmth of yesterday and the fast cold of today. It's why people say things like time flies now. Why a 5-year gap in your 30s feels shorter than one summer in childhood. Because memory expands meaningful time. And the older you get, the less of it you record with that kind of intensity. You don't remember 100 drives to work, but you remember the road trip that broke the pattern. You don't remember every dinner, but you remember the one where something changed. Nostalgia doesn't return to the ordinary, it highlights the vivid. And that makes the past feel richer than the present ever gets the chance to. This creates a strange psychological distortion. You begin to misplace value. You begin to believe that who you were then is more real than who you are now. That your life has somehow dulled. That magic has been lost. But what's actually been lost is your attention. Your openness. The part of you that once noticed light, not just screens. Silence, not just signal. The nostalgia lag plays a cruel trick. It makes your present feel less meaningful in real time, while exalting the past you once rushed through. And because the mind can't revisit the present the way it replays the past, you're stuck chasing something you never properly held. You say, those were the days, not realizing you're romanticizing moments you once prayed would end. A school year, a job, a small apartment, a phase you swore you'd outgrow. Now it feels golden. Why? Because time smoothed the edges. Because memory edits the pain, enhances the glow, and places it just far enough to make it safe to love. But love it you do. And the more you love the past, the more the present feels like a shadow. And that's the heart of the lag. Nostalgia moves slow. Reality moves fast. And your emotions can't keep up with the pace of life. So you begin to live backward. You measure the warmth of today by the chill of the absence it will become. You stand in rooms thinking, one day this will be a memory, and you try to freeze it. But you can't, because freezing it means leaving it. And the truth is, every moment you've ever loved once lived as something unremarkable. You loved it after it passed. You mourned it after it changed. And that means the present isn't lacking. It's just unrecognized. So how do you break the lag? You stop waiting for the present to become the past before you value it. You pause, not just for mindfulness, but for memory building. You ask yourself, if this were 10 years ago, would I remember today? And if the answer is no, you inject meaning. You light a candle. You take the long way home. You call someone and say something you normally wouldn't. You notice a breeze. You record a voice. You decide that this moment is allowed to matter. Because it's not the past that's magic. It's the awareness you bring to it. And you can bring that here. The nostalgia lag only controls you if you let memory dictate meaning. But if you begin to feel the present like a memory in progress, if you begin to see today not just as a duty, but as a detail you'll want back, then time slows again, and warmth returns, and the present starts to earn its place, not as a placeholder for something better, but as something already beautiful. The panic acceleration trick. There's a peculiar trick that panic plays on the mind and body, a distortion that upends your sense of speed and control. In an instant, fear surges like electricity, your heart pounds against your ribs, your breath quickens, your senses snap into sharp focus. You become hyper-aware. Every sound is louder, every detail sharper, every shadow deeper. But as your inner world accelerates, the strange paradox is that it feels as if the world around you is suddenly rushing past, too fast to grasp, as if you're being swept along by a current you can't escape. This is the panic acceleration trick, a fusion of biology and illusion, where your internal engine redlines but the external world blurs out of reach. You may have felt it in a car, skidding on wet pavement, in the seconds after a phone rings with bad news, in the heart-pounding moments before a speech or confrontation. Panic arrives uninvited, a storm that hijacks your nervous system, yanking you into survival mode. Your ancient wiring, the fight-or-flight response, ignites with the force of millennia, flooding your bloodstream with adrenaline, readying you to flee, to fight, to freeze. Suddenly, your thoughts multiply, racing and fracturing, leaping from scenario to scenario, searching desperately for safety. Inside, it's as if 1,000 alarms are blaring. Your mind spins through possibilities, risks, dangers. Each second stretches into 1,000 micro-decisions. Should you run, speak, hide, act? There's a disorienting doubling. Your body surges ahead, but the world outside seems to slip away, moving both too fast and too far. The room tilts, sounds distort, people's voices become distant or strangely loud, and time itself becomes warped, rubbery, elastic. This acceleration isn't just in your imagination. It's hardwired into your biology. When your brain perceives a threat, it triggers a cascade of stress hormones that heighten awareness and prime every muscle for action. Vision narrows, focusing on the source of danger. Your sense of hearing sharpens, scanning for signals. But at the same time, the logical, reflective mind retreats. The primitive, instinctual brain takes over. You are no longer thinking in careful sentences. You are operating in flashes, in impulses, in a language of survival. Yet from the inside, the experience is surreal. The world speeds up, and yet you feel stuck, powerless to slow anything down. It's like being a passenger in a runaway train. Your mind is firing on all cylinders, but the scenery outside rushes by, uncatchable. This trick of perception leaves you feeling both intensely alive and utterly out of control. Afterward, when the panic fades, you're left breathless and shaken, trying to piece together what happened. You may remember fragments, a face, a sound, a word repeated, a sensation of being flooded. The rest is a blur. It's as if you've run a marathon without moving, exhausted from the race your mind just ran at triple speed. This acceleration trick has a purpose rooted deep in evolution. Our ancestors survived by reacting instantly to threats. A rustle in the grass, a sudden shadow, a predator's cry. In the modern world, the threats are less clear, but the body's response is the same. The challenge now is that you can't outrun a deadline, can't fight a bad memory, can't freeze your way through heartbreak. The body's engine surges, but there is nowhere for the energy to go. You become a vessel for unspent adrenaline, searching for release. There's a cost to living this way. Chronic panic carves grooves in your mind, teaching you to brace for impact even when no danger is present. The world begins to feel less safe, more chaotic, more overwhelming. You start to anticipate the rush, to dread the speed, to live in fear of fear itself. Life becomes a series of accelerations and crashes, brief calm, followed by another surge. But there is a way through. It begins with noticing. The moment you feel your heart racing, your senses sharpening, your thoughts multiplying, pause. Remind yourself that the acceleration is inside you, not in the world. The room isn't spinning, your mind is. The moment isn't rushing, your system is. With practice, you can reclaim your breath, widen your vision, soften your focus. You can anchor yourself in the present, letting the storm pass without being swept away. In time, you learn that panic is a trick, a powerful, ancient response to a modern life that rarely needs it. You can witness the surge without becoming the speed. You can feel the world rushing and remember that you can slow down, even when everything inside you screams to run. The panic acceleration trick may never vanish completely, but with understanding and compassion, you become less its victim and more its observer. You discover that even in the rush, you can choose your pace, find your footing, reclaim your place in a world that moves only as quickly as you let it. And in that space, fear loses its grip, and you find a steady calm at the center of the storm. The reflection time warp. There are moments when the world appears perfectly still, your body unmoving, the room silent, sunlight pooling softly across the floor. To any outside observer, you might seem lost in simple idleness, eyes unfocused, hands resting. But beneath that quiet surface, your mind is plunging into a universe without borders, spinning down corridors of memory and possibility, past and future, all at once. This is the reflection time warp, the strange, almost magical phenomenon where a handful of minutes spent in deep introspection can become an endless labyrinth inside your head. So rich, so consuming, That short clock time feels like it has opened into infinity. Everyone knows this sensation, though few truly recognize its depth. You sit alone, maybe late at night, or in the hush before dawn, and let your thoughts wander. At first, you replay the immediate. Today's conversations, recent failures, stray hopes that flicker at the edge of consciousness. But then, the machinery of reflection winds up, and your mind steps off the rails of ordinary time. Suddenly, you're back in your childhood home, recalling the scent of monsoon earth or the peculiar pattern of light on old wallpaper. You remember the faces of people you haven't seen in years, and with every remembered smile or argument, entire chapters of your life unfold inside you. In this state, the clock on the wall becomes irrelevant. Minutes pass, but your inner world is experiencing years, sometimes decades. You relive decisions you made, paths you abandoned, moments of triumph or heartbreak. The texture of these memories is so vivid that for a while, you're elsewhere entirely, not in this room, not in this year, but in every time and place you've ever been. Sometimes, the journey surges even further. Your mind begins to ask, what if? You play out alternative histories, branching futures, conversations you never had but wish you did. A short moment of external stillness becomes a sprawling mental journey, as though you're wandering through a vast archive filled with every version of yourself. What's so haunting about the reflection time warp is the way it exposes the mind's ability to compress and expand reality. The linear flow of clock time dissolves. Inwardly, you might feel you've walked through lifetimes, seen the rise and fall of hopes and fears, all while the tea beside you is barely cooled. There's a paradox at the core of introspection. The more deeply you sink inside yourself, the more time appears to both accelerate and deepen. 5 minutes of focused reflection can yield insights, regrets, or revelations that feel weightier than entire years of daily routine. Consider the writer who stares at a blank page, pen unmoving, lost in thought. To the world, they're procrastinating. Inside, though, they're reliving the day their life changed, recalling every word, every color, every consequence that spilled from one choice. They might surface from this journey changed, even if no words are written. Or the person on a long train ride, staring out the window as scenery slips by, while on the inside, whole lifetimes unfold. First loves, ancient shames, secret ambitions. The distance between two stations becomes a theater for memory, self-examination, and emotional time travel. Science has begun to chart this territory. When we enter deep reflection, brain scans reveal that areas linked to memory, imagination, and emotional regulation become intensely active. The default mode network, the system responsible for daydreams, self-referencing, and mental time travel, lights up. The mind knits together fragments of past, present, and future, exploring identity and meaning far beyond the confines of this single moment. And all the while, the external world remains unchanged, a quiet illusion, a backdrop for the chaos and richness unfolding within. Sometimes, the reflection time warp brings comfort, a sense of wisdom earned, of growth measured not by years, but by understanding. You realize how far you've come, how your old wounds have faded, how choices once agonizing now seem inevitable or even right. But just as often, this warp can become a trap. Too much introspection can pull you into cycles of regret or worry, endlessly looping over mistakes, missed opportunities, or uncertain futures. In these cases, the minutes not only stretch, but darken, filling with the weight of everything unresolved. And yet, we return to reflection again and again. It is the mind's secret tool for integrating experience, learning, and growth. Through this warp, we make sense of who we are, build bridges between our past and future selves, and find the patterns that give life meaning. Even the pain of regret or longing becomes fuel for insight, a way to ensure that the past shapes us but does not imprison us. The reflection time warp also reveals why waiting in stillness can sometimes be so difficult. When you are left alone with your thoughts, stripped of distractions, the sheer volume and complexity of your inner world becomes impossible to ignore. It can be overwhelming. So much life to process, so many roads to revisit, so many versions of yourself to mourn or celebrate. But if you lean in, if you let the warp unfold, you discover treasures buried beneath the noise of daily existence. Clarity, self-forgiveness, unexpected hope. Emerging from such a session of deep reflection is always strange. The world feels slightly changed, as if time itself had doubled back, leaving you older and lighter at once. You blink, shake your head, check your phone, and realize that only 10 minutes have passed. Yet inside, you feel as though you have crossed an ocean, mapped entire continents of memory, and returned with a suitcase full of insight. Perhaps this is the quiet superpower of being human, the ability to travel far and wide without moving an inch, to turn a moment of stillness into an odyssey of understanding. The reflection time warp is proof that time, as we measure it, is only a thin surface layer. Beneath it lies a vast ocean, one we can cross in silence at any moment, with nothing but the current of our own thoughts. When the outside world demands speed and productivity, the real journey still waits inside. Infinite, unpredictable, bottomless, yours to wander and return from, changed in ways only you will ever fully know. The repetition time loop. You wake up, and it feels like yesterday. Not metaphorically, literally. The same alarm tone, the same brushstroke of sunlight through the window, the same walk, the same tasks, the same conversations wrapped in different words. The clock moves, the calendar flips, but inside it's all the same, as if you're living in a loop. A soft, silent reel that replays itself with just enough variation to pretend it's new. This is the repetition time loop, when your life continues forward, but your experience of it stays still. You are alive, but not moving. This isn't a glitch in time. It's a glitch in perception. When repetition becomes your dominant rhythm, your brain stops registering change. And when the brain stops tracking change, it stops tracking time. You don't feel weeks. You don't feel months. You only feel cycles, repeating patterns that rob the present of its edges. And so the days flatten. You find yourself wondering, was that this week or last? You forget what season it is. Birthdays sneak up on you like strangers. Milestones feel meaningless because nothing marks them. Nothing disrupts the flow. But here's what most don't understand. The repetition loop isn't always unpleasant. It's not boredom. It's familiarity weaponized. A comforting cage. You know what tomorrow looks like. You know what to expect. No surprises. No danger. No decisions. Just a reel that plays and plays and plays. And one day, you realize you've memorized every line of a life you barely remember choosing. The illusion is subtle. It tells you you're productive, you're stable, you're safe, and maybe you are, but you're also disappearing. Because repetition isn't neutral, it erodes novelty. And novelty is what gives time its shape. A routine without deviation may be efficient, but it is also a blade. It carves away memory. It sands down your sense of progression. And before long, you don't know if you've been doing this for 2 months or 2 years. Time becomes thick, unmeasured, indistinct. The danger lies in how easily the loop disguises itself as responsibility. You show up. You answer emails. You check boxes. You pay bills. You maintain everything, except yourself, the internal part of you that needs variation, story, stimulation. That part goes quiet. Not from trauma, from sameness. You're not broken. You're repeating. And repetition doesn't need to feel like punishment to be dangerous. It can feel like comfort, like control, like peace. Until one day, you wake up and can't tell the difference between last Friday and today. You flip through photos and think, was that this year? You scroll through your own timeline and feel like a spectator, not the author. Because when life becomes a loop, you stop collecting moments. You stop evolving the internal world. And time, real time, requires evolution to be felt. So why do we choose repetition? Because it protects us from decision fatigue, from uncertainty, from the fear of failing at something new. Routines give us predictability, and predictability gives us the illusion of control. But that control comes at a cost. The cost is the sense that life is passing without presence. You find yourself remembering your teenage years with a strange fondness, not because they were better, but because they were chaotic, unpredictable. Time had weight. You felt hours. You felt days. Every week brought some new disaster or discovery. And now, the most unpredictable part of your day is what's on the lunch menu. And it's not your fault. Adult life requires repetition to function. But when repetition becomes identity, when yourself gets stuck in the loop, it becomes a slow erasure. But here's the truth no one tells you. Breaking the loop doesn't require a life overhaul. You don't need to move across the world. You don't need to quit your job or burn the schedule. You just need to interrupt the rhythm. You need to create intentional contrast. You need moments that stand out, not because they're wild, but because they're chosen. It could be a new habit, a walk at night, a spontaneous conversation, learning something unnecessary, creating something no one asked for, speaking a truth you've avoided. These things fracture the loop, not in chaos, but in clarity. They remind the mind, we're not stuck, because the loop isn't time. It's behavior, and behavior can be changed. Ask yourself, what did I do this week that I'll remember 5 years from now? If the answer is nothing, it's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of the loop. And the loop is sneaky. It'll convince you that doing something new is reckless. That breaking rhythm is dangerous. But what's truly dangerous is forgetting how to feel time at all. Repetition eats the edges of time. It takes color from memory. It takes weight from days. And unless interrupted, it will quietly rob your life of the very thing that makes it yours. Your awareness of living it. You're not running out of time. You're just not feeling it. So break something. Shift something. Say yes to something you always delay. Say no to something you always allow. Change one thread in the pattern and watch the real stutter. That stutter? That's life re-entering the frame. The storytime distortion gap. Time is a strange shapeshifter when it passes through a story. There's a gap, a distortion, between the hours that clocks record and the way those same hours are felt, stretched, or compressed by the narratives that frame them. It's a phenomenon as old as the first campfire tales. A story, a movie, a memory. Even a dream can expand or shrink your sense of duration, making minutes feel like moments or moments feel eternal. We measure our days with watches and calendars, but deep down, we measure them by emotional structure, by tension and release, by the journeys we're taken on, far more than by the simple march of time. Think about the last movie you watched that left you breathless. Maybe 2 hours passed, maybe 3, but when the credits rolled, you were startled to find the night had vanished. You remember the suspense, the mounting stakes, the climax, the relief of resolution, not the clock. The story had its own tempo, pulling you through peaks and valleys, making an hour feel like a heartbeat, or a scene linger long after it ended. Or consider a book so immersive that you lose track of sunrise and sunset, the world beyond the page fading until the story lets you go. This is the storytime distortion gap. The emotional journey outweighs the chronological one. But it's not just fiction. Your own memories work the same way. The moments you recall most vividly, childhood adventures, heartbreaks, triumphs, are rarely the ones that lasted the longest. A 5-minute conversation can take up more space in your life than a 5-year routine. It's the narrative arc, the emotional structure, the sense of before and after, of tension and release, that shapes your memory sense of time. A summer of sameness blurs, but a single unexpected night, dense with emotion, remains as vast as a whole season. Our minds crave structure, and stories give it to us. The classic arc, beginning, middle, end, becomes a map that guides our perception through chaos. In a film, you wait for the plot twist, the reversal, the final revelation. In life, you construct your own story. Everything changed when, I'll never forget the day, that was the year when, you tie time to transformation, not to the ticking of clock. Science has its explanations. Neuroscientists point to the way our brains encode events with heightened emotion: fear, joy, suspense, relief. When a story or experience is structured around conflict and resolution, your attention sharpens, your memory becomes more detailed, and time becomes elastic. During long periods of routine, your brain takes fewer snapshots. The days slip by, unremarkable, hard to distinguish. But in narrative moments, you remember every beat. The story stretches or compresses your sense of time, depending on its structure, its rhythm, its emotional intensity. This distortion isn't limited to entertainment or nostalgia. In crisis or trauma, your sense of time can collapse or expand dramatically. Seconds in an accident can feel like hours. Weeks of anxiety can feel like a never-ending loop. Even in moments of flow, when you're lost in a creative project or deep conversation, time drops away, held in suspense by the narrative unfolding inside you. The storytime distortion gap reveals something profound about being human. We are creatures wired for narrative. We don't just live. We shape and reshape our experience through the stories we tell ourselves and others. Our sense of time, then, isn't fixed. It's bent and colored by the emotional structure of our lives. A day can last forever or vanish in a flash, depending on the meaning we give it. There's beauty and danger in this. The beauty is that stories can stretch time, make a single hour feel eternal, turn fleeting moments into lifelong memories. But the danger is that we can become lost in the distortion, forgetting to notice the quiet stretches between climaxes, dismissing the ordinary hours that actually make up most of our lives. We risk letting life slip by while we wait for the next story-worthy moment. Yet, knowing this, you can begin to reclaim your own sense of time. You can savor the narrative arcs, but also pay attention to the gentle background of your days. You can honor the small, uneventful hours, knowing they matter too, even if they don't fit a perfect story. And when you find yourself caught in the middle of a narrative, whether it's your own or one you've borrowed, you can pause, notice the distortion, and ask, how does this story bend my sense of time? So the next time you lose yourself in a movie, a memory, or a daydream, pay attention to the gap, the space between clock time and story time. Let it remind you that your life is not just a series of minutes, but a woven tale of meaning, emotion, and transformation. In the end, what you remember isn't how long you lived, but how deeply you journeyed, how fully you felt, how the stories you carried made time itself a living, breathing character in your life. The age acceleration effect. Why does childhood summer feel endless, while adult years vanish in the blink of an eye? Why did waiting for your birthday as a kid feel like climbing a mountain? But now entire seasons collapse into fleeting flashes, and you find yourself surprised at how quickly another year has disappeared. This is the age acceleration effect, a subtle but relentless change in how you perceive time as you grow older. It's not that the clock moves faster. It's that your mind's reference point, the framework by which you judge the length of a moment, is always changing, shrinking, and distorting the map of your life. As a child, time is a giant landscape. When you're 5 years old, a single year is a fifth of your entire existence. It's enormous, long enough for worlds to change, for new skills to be mastered, for you to reinvent yourself again and again. Each new experience is bright and novel, and novelty itself slows down the feeling of time passing. Days are adventures. Weeks stretch out, each memory unique, colored by the thrill of encountering everything for the first time. Summer break might as well be forever. Waiting for a family trip, for a festival, or for the school year to end feels agonizingly slow. But as you grow, everything changes. The ratio shifts. By the time you're 30, a year is just a 30th of your life. At 60, it's a 60th. In this new arithmetic, each year feels smaller, almost compressed, and the flow of time accelerates in perception. It's not a trick of nostalgia or the wishful thinking of adults longing for lost youth. It's a built-in cognitive distortion, rooted in the mathematics of memory and perspective. Consider how memory works. Childhood is dense with firsts. Your first bike ride, your first friend, your first taste of independence, or heartbreak. Each experience is vivid, logged as a landmark in your mind's internal timeline. The brain encodes these new events with extra attention, because novelty is essential for learning and survival. But adulthood often becomes a series of routines. Days blur together: work, home, errands, the same conversations, the same streets. Without fresh experiences to anchor them, months and even years compress, vanishing into the background. Scientists call this phenomenon proportional theory. It's the idea that our sense of time is relative, not absolute. When you were 10, 1 year was an eternity. It was 10% of your total life. At 50, it's just a drop in the bucket. Your mind uses your own lifespan as a measuring stick, so each passing year feels proportionally shorter than the last. The reference point keeps shrinking, and the effect is cumulative. The older you get, the smaller each year feels, accelerating your journey through life whether you want it to or not. Real life offers countless examples of this effect. Talk to any grandparent, and they'll tell you the decades flew by, that it seems like only yesterday they were young. Ask a teenager to wait a week for something they want and watch the impatience boil. To them, 7 days is a massive chunk of their lives. The same week, for a parent juggling jobs and responsibilities, slips past almost unnoticed. The pace of the outside world hasn't changed, but the sense of time inside the mind absolutely has. This acceleration isn't just about numbers. It's also about novelty. When you travel to a new country, try a new hobby, or meet new people, time seems to slow down again, because your mind is forced to pay attention, to encode new details, to break the monotony. That's why a week of vacation in a place you've never been can feel longer than a month spent at home doing the usual routines. Children live in a near-constant state of novelty, but as adults, we often settle into grooves so deep that years can vanish with little to mark their passage. The age acceleration effect is bittersweet. On one hand, it makes adulthood feel efficient, even liberating. You don't agonize over every day or every week. You learn to move through life with a certain grace, letting go of the urgency that once made every moment an emergency. On the other hand, it can lead to regret, a sense that time is slipping away, that you're missing out on the fullness and depth you once took for granted. But the effect isn't inevitable. It's possible to slow your inner clock, to stretch time again, if you deliberately seek out new experiences. Try learning something outside your comfort zone, traveling somewhere unfamiliar, or forming new relationships. Pay closer attention to the small moments. The taste of your morning coffee, the laughter of a friend, the feeling of rain on your skin. Novelty and attention are the antidotes to the age acceleration effect, restoring a sense of expansiveness to even the most ordinary days. At its core, the age acceleration effect is a reminder of how precious time is, how the longest days become the shortest years, how life is both endless and ephemeral. It urges you to resist the flattening of routine, to keep seeking newness, to keep anchoring your days with meaning. Every year may feel shorter than the last, but every moment you truly inhabit is a victory against the shrinking reference point of memory. So the next time you find yourself stunned that another year has passed, wondering where the time went, pause and remember. Your mind is playing its oldest trick, measuring the present against a growing past. You can't stop the clock, but you can fill the days with color, variety, and wonder. Because in the end, the speed of life is measured not by the ticking of the second hand, but by the richness of experience you choose to create, no matter how old you are or how fast the years seem to fly. The phantom time interval. Of all the strange ways our minds can warp time, few are as quietly unsettling as the phantom time interval. You know this feeling. One evening you're closing your eyes, thinking it's Monday, and when you open them again, it's suddenly Friday. Or a whole month vanishes in a blur, as if someone secretly erased a stretch of your life and left you searching for missing pages in your own diary. This isn't the dramatic, cinematic time travel of movies or the deliberate forgetting we associate with trauma. This is subtler. It's the unremarkable days, the unnoticed weeks, the empty spaces in memory that you only notice in hindsight. And when you do, the realization feels cold, almost haunting, as if you'd stepped through a hidden door in reality and found nothing waiting on the other side. Let's pause here. Think of the last time you looked at a calendar and felt a jolt of disbelief, asking yourself, wait, how is it already August? Where did July go? Did I really live through those weeks? Or was I just a shadow moving through routines, not truly awake? This is the phantom time interval, a psychological blind spot where your conscious mind checks out and your life keeps moving forward almost on autopilot. Days blend together, not because you were busy or distracted, but because your brain quietly decided that nothing in particular was worth remembering. You were there, and yet you weren't. What causes this strange slipstream of existence? It's not a defect or a sign of illness. Instead, it's a side effect of how memory, attention, and emotion stitch together our sense of time. The mind works like a spotlight, shining brightly on moments of novelty, danger, or deep emotion. But when life settles in a sameness, commutes, chores, scrolling through screens, endless routines, your spotlight dims. Memory takes shortcuts. It compresses the uneventful days, edits out the monotony, and quietly files away whole weeks as a single blurry entry. Nothing happened. You don't notice the deletion while it's happening. Only later do you find yourself staring back, unable to account for where you were or who you were for that lost stretch. This is why childhood summers seem to last forever, while adulthood months dissolve into mist. As a kid, everything is new, every moment full of firsts, every day another spark. Your mind records it all in vivid color, time expanding with every experience. But as you age, life repeats itself. Once you've driven the same road 1,000 times, or answered the same emails, or survived the same meetings, your brain stops cataloging details. The days shrink, not because time speeds up, but because your mind doesn't bother to keep every copy. Here's an example. Think of the pandemic years. For millions, 2020 and 2021 became a single, strange blur. Lockdowns, repetitive days indoors, the absence of new places or faces. These erase the usual landmarks in our minds. People remember the beginning and the end, but in the middle, whole months are missing, like a blacked-out reel in a film. Ask someone what they did in May of 2020, and chances are they can't tell you. Not because it was traumatic, but because it was blank. Their mind didn't write the memory in the first place. There's another layer to the phantom time interval, the emotional cost. The sudden awareness that you've lost time isn't just puzzling. It's a little terrifying. You start questioning your choices. Did you waste those days? Did you live at all? The realization can feel like grief, as if a piece of your life died quietly, and you only noticed the funeral long after it happened. Some people respond with denial, filling in the gaps with imagined details, convincing themselves they remember more than they do. Others become obsessed with capturing life, taking photos, journaling, recording every moment in an effort to anchor themselves to time. But no matter what you do, the phantom interval returns, always lurking in the background, proof that life can slip by even when you think you're paying attention. This phenomenon isn't limited to ordinary routines. It can happen during times of high stress, when your mind goes into survival mode and stops writing new memories just to protect you from overload. It happens to people caring for sick relatives, to students buried under deadlines, to workers lost in jobs they don't love. Even moments of happiness can disappear into phantom intervals if they blend into sameness. Think of vacations spent doing nothing, days on a beach where the sun and sand merge into one timeless stretch. You enjoy it, but later, when you try to remember, there's nothing but a feeling, a mood, no sharp details to pin down. Scientists have tried to map this with brain scans, discovering that when our surroundings or routines lack novelty, the hippocampus, the region responsible for creating new memories, slows down. The result? Time contracts. Your sense of self seems to jump forward, skipping pages. Sometimes it's a defense mechanism. Sometimes it's just how the machinery works. The danger lies not in the vanishing itself, but in what it reveals about how we live. The phantom time interval is a silent warning. It tells you that life is slipping into autopilot, that your mind is hungry for meaning, for difference, for moments that wake you up. The more you repeat yourself, the more days you sacrifice to the void. So what's the antidote? Sometimes it's as simple as breaking a routine, taking a different route home, talking to a stranger, writing a letter to your future self. Sometimes it means facing uncomfortable truths about how much of your life you're actually living versus just enduring. Ultimately, the phantom time interval is both a symptom and a message. It's a glitch in the mind's accounting of reality, but it's also a mirror. It forces you to ask, what have I truly lived? What have I missed? If time is the only currency you never get back, how much are you willing to lose to sameness, to oblivion, to the unremarkable fade of memory? And what can you do right now to ensure that tomorrow doesn't vanish before you've had a chance to live it wide awake? That question lingers, as haunting as the lost days themselves, a silent invitation to break the spell, to mark your presence, and to steal back the time you almost let slip away. The trauma-time dislocation. Of all the ways our minds bend reality, few are as devastating and bewildering as the dislocation of time that follows extreme trauma. Trauma is not just an emotional wound. It's a fracture in the very structure of your experience, a moment so violent or unbearable that it slices straight through your memory, your sense of self, and even the flow of time itself. If you've ever lived through something truly harrowing, a near-fatal accident, an assault, the sudden loss of someone you loved, you might have noticed that the seconds, minutes, even days surrounding that event don't behave the way ordinary time does. They twist, fracture, collapse, expand. Some moments become permanently frozen in crystal clarity, endlessly replaying. Others vanish completely, as if reality itself edited them out. Imagine a timeline stretching smoothly, the days and hours lined up in neat succession. Trauma is like dropping a meteor onto that line. It shatters the continuity, leaving gaping holes and jagged edges where time used to flow. For many, there's a distinct before and after, but the event itself feels unreachable, sealed in a glass case or erased entirely. People say things like, I remember every detail, but I don't remember the hours before or after. You might recall a car's headlights, the smell of burning rubber, a scream, but not how you got to the hospital, or even the days that followed. Memory becomes a collage of sharp fragments, surrounded by blank spaces, stitched together by emotion rather than chronology. This isn't just forgetfulness. It's your brain's defense, a desperate attempt to wall off the unbearable. During trauma, the body's stress system floods you with adrenaline and cortisol. Survival mode kicks in. Your senses sharpen, focusing on what matters most, the threat. But the brain's memory systems, especially the hippocampus, responsible for organizing experiences into coherent sequences, get overwhelmed. Instead of a smooth film reel, your mind ends up with scattered snapshots, some stuck on endless repeat, others so faded they're almost gone. This is why survivors of trauma often describe feeling as though time stopped or skipped. Their internal clocks are no longer tracking in sync with the outside world. Take, for example, a survivor of a violent attack. In interviews, many describe seeing every detail of the attacker's face, the way the lights slanted through the room, the exact words shouted, yet the minutes leading up to the event or the escape that followed are shrouded in fog. Some can't remember the ambulance ride at all. Others recall suddenly being safe, with no sense of how they got there. These memory gaps aren't evidence of weakness. They're the brain's emergency exit. When the normal pathways of experience become overloaded, the mind splinters the timeline to protect you from reliving the full horror. But trauma's distortion of time isn't limited to erasure. Sometimes it's the opposite. Moments expand until they seem almost infinite. Seconds crawl, each heartbeat thundering in your ears, each breath lasting an eternity. This phenomenon, called time dilation, is common in traumatic events. People involved in accidents or disasters often say it felt like everything slowed down, as if they could see every detail in slow motion. This is the brain's attempt to heighten awareness, to give you the best chance of survival. But afterward, that stretch lingers, and it becomes impossible to fit those elongated moments back into the normal flow of life. The effects of trauma on time perception don't end with the event itself. For months, or even years, survivors may find their memories fragmented, their sense of chronology unreliable. Ordinary days seem to blur, while traumatic moments stay unnervingly vivid. For some, anniversaries or reminders can trigger flashbacks, where it feels as if the trauma is happening all over again, not as a memory, but as a collapse of the boundary between past and present. This is why trauma is often described as timeless pain. It isn't bound by the ordinary rules of before and after. Instead, it exists as an island of intensity, forever separate, but always threatening to flood the mainland of your daily life. This is also why trauma can fundamentally change your sense of self. If your memory is your autobiography, then trauma tears out chapters, rewrites others, and inserts impossible, non-linear pages. You might feel like a stranger to yourself, as if you've stepped into someone else's life or lost years you can never reclaim. This alienation is compounded by the world's expectation that time should heal, that you should move on. But how do you heal when your experience of time itself is broken? When the wound is not just emotional, but chronological? The science of trauma has shown us that these distortions are not failures. They're the result of ancient survival mechanisms colliding with modern life. The brain, faced with the unendurable, does whatever it must to shield you. Sometimes that means freezing memory. Sometimes it means erasing it altogether. But understanding this doesn't make it any less lonely or disorienting. It's like living in a house where certain rooms are locked, others are haunted, and the clocks never agree on what hour it is. Yet, amidst this chaos, there are paths to repair. Therapy, especially trauma-informed approaches like EMDR or somatic experiencing, helps survivors process the fragmented memories, slowly allowing the brain to reintegrate what was once walled off. The process is slow and often painful because it means facing what was hidden, feeling what was numbed. But with time, some find that the jagged fragments of their experience can be pieced into something like a story, if not a smooth one. It won't erase the scars or return the stolen hours, but can restore a sense of authorship over your own timeline. So if you or someone you know lives with trauma's time dislocation, understand that this is a deeply human response, a testament to your brain's need to survive, not a weakness. The road to healing may be non-linear, filled with flashbacks and silences, with moments that rush and others that stand eternally still. But even in the most fractured timelines, there can be moments of clarity, of connection, and even, eventually, of peace. Trauma is the wound that warps time, but you are the witness who endures, who remembers, and who, one day, may find a way to move forward, even as the clocks inside you still keep their own impossible time. The micro-time obsession loop. You glance at the clock. 3 seconds pass. You glance again. 2 more. You count your breaths. You analyze the pause between each one. You watch the minutes crawl by, not in the background, but in the spotlight. Time, once a silent rhythm behind your life, becomes the loudest voice in the room. This is the micro-time obsession loop. When your awareness of time becomes so sharp, so controlling, that it fractures the natural flow of experience. You're no longer in time. You're watching it, measuring it, micromanaging it. And the more you track it, the stranger it behaves. This loop begins quietly. A simple need to be more efficient. A desire to optimize your day. You start timing tasks, breaking the day into pieces. You quantify rest. You schedule joy. And at first, it feels like control. Like you finally seized the one thing that always slipped through your fingers. But soon, time becomes a trap. You start noticing the delay between thinking and acting. The way 5 minutes feel different depending on the context. You watch seconds stretch during waiting. You panic when a task takes longer than expected. You begin to feel robbed when time passes and you can't account for it. You're no longer living with time. You're fighting inside it. This hyper-awareness creates distortion. It slows the present, but not with presence. It's not mindfulness, it's obsession, a kind of mental claustrophobia. You feel suffocated by the very thing you're trying to control. Seconds begin to feel dense, heavy, like molasses dripping instead of a river flowing. The irony is brutal. The more you try to capture time, the more slippery it becomes. Your brain, overwhelmed by constant time checking, begins to process less context. Everything becomes a timestamp, not a moment. And the human experience requires more than measurement. It needs meaning. It needs motion. But you've replaced motion with watching. You can't even enjoy rest anymore. A break isn't a pause, it's a countdown. You glance at the clock mid-laughter. You feel guilt for idle seconds. You micromanage your free time as if joy should come with metrics. And when it doesn't, you blame the clock. But the clock isn't broken. Your relationship to time is. You've entered a loop where awareness turns into anxiety, where every tick reminds you of your inability to stretch time far enough to fit your expectations, where you believe, if I just managed better, I'd have more time. But you don't need more time. You need less pressure, because obsession doesn't give you more life, it takes it. Think of the last time you truly lost track of time. Not because you were lazy, but because you were immersed, flowing. That moment felt infinite. That's what time does when you stop measuring it. It opens. But when you stare at it, time freezes. Fights back. It shrinks. Like a spotlight burning too hot. Your focus scorches the very fabric of the moment. This obsession often grows from fear. Fear of wasting life, of missing out, of not doing enough. So you overcorrect. You try to own every moment. But time isn't a possession. It's a partner. And the more you try to dominate it, the more distant it becomes. You develop rituals, checking the time before and after everything, calculating efficiency like your soul runs on spreadsheets. You may even begin to measure thoughts, how long a decision takes, how long a sentence forms. Time becomes currency, and you're always in debt. Even sleep becomes a battlefield. You count the hours, you check the minutes, and the ticking itself becomes louder than your heartbeat. But here's the harsh truth. Nothing steals time like the obsession with it. You miss conversations because you're thinking about duration. You rush art because you're watching the clock. You stop walking slowly because you're calculating pace. You kill joy by trying to measure it. And in the end, the time you thought you were saving is exactly the time you never actually lived. The micro-time obsession loop is not about being efficient. It's about being consumed. You may start to mistrust your own perception. You think, that felt like an hour, but it was 12 minutes. You ask, why does 5 minutes feel different every day? You realize you're living in a world where objective time and experience time never align, and it drives you mad. So how do you break the loop? You surrender precision. Not entirely, but intentionally. You create zones in your day where the clock doesn't enter. A walk without a tracker. A conversation without glancing at your phone. A creative moment without caring how long it takes. You let time blur just a little, because in that blur, something opens up. Space, breath, wonder. You're not failing when you lose track of time. You're finally feeling it. And feeling time is not about control. It's about intimacy, trust, the willingness to let moments unfold without a stopwatch judging their worth. Time is not your enemy. But obsession turns it into one. So stop counting and start noticing. The hyper-focused time skip. There's a peculiar magic in the way time disappears when you're completely absorbed. You sit down to work, to create, to practice, and the world narrows until only the task in front of you exists. The chatter of the mind quiets. The ticking of the clock fades. And then, without warning, hours have passed. You look up, startled, trying to piece together where the day went. There is no memory of the passage, just a seamless stretch of attention, as if you blinked and found yourself on the other side. This is the hyper-focused time skip, a phenomenon as exhilarating as it is unsettling, where the absence of memory tricks you into thinking that nothing happened, even as life unfolded in silent, concentrated motion. You know the feeling. Maybe it's the trance of painting, code flowing from your fingers, The rhythm of playing an instrument, the deep dive into a book, or the single-minded focus of a surgeon in the operating room. The outside world dissolves. Hunger and fatigue vanish. The usual parade of worries, regrets, and future plans disappears. There's only flow, pure, undiluted presence. You become the work becomes you. The mind is utterly silent, and yet you're more alive than ever. But when you emerge from this state, there's a peculiar emptiness. It's as if the hours you spent in deep focus have been erased, leaving only a thin thread of memory. You may wonder, did I waste this time, or did I live more fully than ever before? The paradox is profound. You accomplished so much, created, learned, solved, yet there's little to recall, no highlight reel, no sense of journey. The absence of memory makes the stretch feel almost blank, as if you vanished from your own life for a while. Neuroscience tells us that in flow, the brain's sense of time is altered. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for self-monitoring, doubt, and timekeeping, quiets down. In its place, a more primal, direct awareness takes over. Then now expands to fill everything, and there's no space left for tracking minutes or hours. You aren't making memories in the usual way because your brain isn't evaluating, comparing, or archiving. It's just being immersed. When you look back, there are few footprints in the sand. This is why flow is so addictive and so strange. For a while, you escape yourself, the inner critic, the restless planner, the chronic rememberer. You slip beyond boredom and anxiety, entering a state psychologists call optimal experience. The reward is a sense of purpose and pleasure deeper than almost any other. The cost is that you lose time, sometimes literally. Life moves forward, unnoticed, unremembered. Think of the artist who paints from sunset to sunrise, oblivious to the changing light. The scientist who forgets to eat while chasing a discovery. The child lost in play, immune to bedtime warnings. In each case, the absence of memory is not a sign of emptiness, but of total presence. The world shrinks to a pinpoint of intention, and in that pinpoint, you find something close to transcendence. But the hyper-focused time skip has its shadows, too. It's easy to mistake the blankness for loss, to believe that because you can't recall the details, the hours didn't matter. You may worry that you're missing life, even as you're living more intensely than ever. There's a strange sadness in coming back from flow, an ache for the missing time, a sense that you were gone and can't get it back. The danger is in chasing this state at the expense of everything else, using it to escape feelings you'd rather not face. Yet perhaps this is the secret gift of the time skip. It reminds you that not all living is measured by memory. Some of the most meaningful moments are the ones you can't replay, the ones you experienced so deeply that there was no room left for remembering. These hours weren't wasted. They were lived with such totality that they left no residue. The mind, for once, was silent and the self was free. If you notice your days passing in a blur, if you emerge from work or play surprised by the time that has slipped away, pause. Recognize the miracle. You were truly present, even if you cannot narrate what happened. In the absence of memory, there is evidence of immersion, of flow, of a life briefly lived without friction or distraction. But balance is needed too. Remember to step out of flow, to mark moments with intention, to savor the transitions and pauses. Memory is made in the spaces between focus, in the stories you tell yourself, in the meaning you assign to what you've done. Let the time skips remind you of what's possible, but don't let them erase the rest of your life. The hyper-focused time skip is both a mystery and a blessing, a glimpse of what it means to be lost and found in the same breath. Trust that the hours were not lost, even if you can't recount them. Trust that presence, not recollection, is sometimes the truest measure of a day well lived. The clock watcher's curse. Picture yourself in a classroom, or at your desk, or waiting in a line that barely seems to move. Your eyes drift to the clock. Seconds become visible, almost audible, each one a stubborn droplet stretching itself out, as if just to test your patience. You watch the minute hand, willing it forward, but it barely budges. This is the clock watcher's curse, a paradox woven into the fabric of perception. When you focus on time, it slows to a crawl. When you forget to pay attention, it vanishes, slipping by so fast you barely notice its passage. Why does this happen? Why does time betray us when we need it most? When we're bored, anxious, or desperate for release? The answer lies in the way attention warps our experience. Time is not just a mechanical ticking outside of us. It is a sensation inside our heads, shaped and stretched by where our focus goes. The more intently you track it, the heavier it feels, and the more you try to look away, the lighter it becomes, like a trick of light on the wall. Consider waiting for the end of a long workday. You check the clock at 3:15, convinced an hour has passed. You check again, 3:19. For minutes, stretched into an eternity. Or think of the child in class, counting down the seconds to recess. Each tick is a small torment. Their mind, fixed on the measurement of time, becomes hypersensitive to its passage. But now remember those days when you're so lost in work or laughter that hours seem to evaporate in an instant. You glance at the clock and are shocked to see the day gone, the sun already setting. You live those hours, but without the weight of watching. The science behind this is both simple and profound. Your sense of time is a product of how much new information your brain processes. When you are watching the clock, bored, restless, disengaged, your mind becomes hyper-aware of each second because there is nothing else competing for your attention. Time, stripped of novelty or distraction, becomes a burden. Each tick is like an echo in an empty room, each second demanding notice. In contrast, when you're absorbed, reading, talking, learning, playing, a flood of fresh impressions fills your mind. The brain, busy processing, let's go of the clock. Time slips by, untethered to your awareness, and when you return to it, you find it has flown. This is the root of the paradox. The more you want time to pass, the slower it goes. The more you forget about it, the faster it runs. The clock watcher's curse turns desire into a trap. Longing for the future, you stretch the present. Dreading a moment's end, you find it gone before you're ready. It's a dance between control and surrender, one that plays out in offices, classrooms, hospitals, airports, and bedrooms every single day. Think about the person lying awake at night, counting the minutes until sleep comes. The harder they try, the longer it seems to take. Or the athlete watching the countdown in the final seconds of a match, heart pounding, every moment swelling with urgency. For them, time distends, forcing them to live in slow motion. But for the performer lost in music, the painter lost in color, the couple lost in conversation until dawn, time does the opposite. It evaporates, leaving only the memory of something vast and inexplicably brief. Even technology has amplified the clock watcher's curse. The digital clock on your phone is always there, precise to the second, inviting you to check and recheck, fracturing your focus and magnifying the sensation of time dragging. Social media, with its endless refreshes and updates, becomes a way to distract yourself from the crawl, but can also trap you in loops where minutes bleed away unnoticed, leaving you unsure whether time was slow or fast, wasted or full. The curse follows us into every corner of life. In hospitals, patients watch the clock for test results. In airports, travelers count down to boarding. In prison cells and lonely apartments, time itself becomes the adversary, a presence to be measured, endured, survived. But look at the opposite, the vacation that goes by too quickly, the childhood summer that seems short in memory, the conversation that carries you through the night. Here, it is forgetting time, abandoning the clock, that delivers freedom. Yet, there's a strange power hidden in this curse. Knowing that attention slows or speeds time, you can use it as a tool. Fill your days with novelty, learning, challenge, and presence. Seek out flow, the state where action and awareness blend, where time loses its grip and you simply are. When you find yourself trapped by the crawl, ask what you're missing. Are you bored, disengaged, waiting for something outside yourself to save you? Or can you re-enter your life, immerse in detail, story, or sensation, and let the clock fade back into the background? There is no escaping the passage of time, but there is escaping the curse of watching it too closely. The secret is to shift your focus, to turn from the minute hand to the moment. Children know this instinctively. They lose themselves in play, and time ceases to exist until they are called back. We lose this gift as we grow older, obsessed with schedules, productivity, and control. But we can reclaim it, if only for a little while, by remembering what it feels like to let go. In the end, the clock watcher's curse is a reminder that time is not only measured by clocks and calendars, but by attention, memory, and meaning. You can't make hours longer or shorter, but you can fill them, stretch them, let them go, or let them fly. The next time you find yourself trapped by the crawl, watching seconds drip by like water, remember that you have the power to step outside, to change the texture of your experience, to live not by the tick of the clock, but by the beat of your own awareness. In that shift, time may not change, but your experience of it will. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast, always somehow yours to shape. The silence duration bias. There's a peculiar distortion hidden in the moments we mistake for nothing. The silence duration bias. You felt it in elevators, in the pause after question, in the endless stretch between two thunderclaps on a stormy night. Science tells us silence is just the absence of sound, but your mind insists otherwise. When the noise falls away, a strange alchemy unfolds inside your head. Suddenly, seconds lengthen, gaps become chasms, and time itself seems to slow down, thickening like syrup in your awareness. It's as if silence bends the very fabric of experience, making you acutely aware not only of the world around you, but of yourself. Why does quiet feel so different, so unnaturally long? The answer is written in the machinery of the brain. Our minds are built to process stimulation, a constant flow of input from voices, machines, traffic, screens. This river of noise creates a rhythm, a pulse that structures our sense of passing time. When that river dries up, when there's a sudden stillness, your brain's clock loses its anchor. Deprived of external markers, it turns inward, and your thoughts rush in to fill the void. You become hyper-aware of each tick, each breath, each heartbeat. It's why an awkward silence in a conversation can feel endless, while hours spent listening to music or chatter seem to vanish in a blink. Consider the classic experiment. Subjects are placed in soundproof rooms, asked to estimate the passing of time. Without noise, minutes feel twice as long. Some report feeling as if time has stopped altogether, or as if the silence itself has weight. Your mind, denied external cues, starts to magnify every small sensation, creating a kind of echo chamber for your own thoughts. You notice the creak of a chair, the thump of your heart, the restless flicker of your attention. Each second grows, each moment expands. Silence, in this sense, is not empty. It's overflowing with your own internal dialogue, memories, even anxieties. The effect is so powerful that it shapes culture and emotion. In music, for instance, a well-timed pause, the rest, can be more dramatic than a crescendo. Silence is not neutral. It's charged, capable of building suspense, of forcing listeners to confront themselves. In film, the absence of sound before a twist or reveal is used to manipulate audience tension, to stretch a moment until it almost snaps. Even in conversation, silence isn't just a pause. It's a message, sometimes comforting, sometimes threatening, always meaningful. But the silence duration bias also affects our daily lives in subtle ways. Think of waiting for an answer after you confess something important. The longer the silence, the more your brain races, imagining judgments or outcomes. Or think of standing at a crosswalk in the middle of the night. No cars, no voices, just the hum of your own anticipation. The quiet becomes heavy, every second stretching far beyond its true length. This isn't just psychological, it's biological. Our brains are primed to notice absence as much as presence, to see a lack of signal as something significant, even urgent. Sometimes this bias is a gift. It can make moments of awe, like watching snowfall in the middle of the night or sitting in a vast cathedral, feel endless, allowing beauty to linger. Other times, it's a torment. Insomnia is often a battle not against time, but against the agonizing elasticity of silence in the dark. The more you notice the quiet, the more your mind multiplies it. It becomes a hall of mirrors for your worries. The silence duration bias is not just about perception, but about self-confrontation. When the world grows quiet, there is nothing left to distract you from yourself. This is why many people fear silence. It is not emptiness, but exposure, a space where your thoughts, usually drowned out by daily life, suddenly demand to be heard. In meditation, silence is cultivated as a tool for self-awareness, a way to slow time and see yourself more clearly. In torture, isolation and sensory deprivation weaponize this same principle, stretching seconds into eternity. Understanding this bias can change the way you approach your own experience of time. The next time silence falls, notice what happens in your mind. Watch how quickly you rush to fill it, with words, music, movement, or even anxiety. Ask yourself why. Is it because silence is uncomfortable or because it reveals too much? Try just for a moment to sit in the stretch. Listen to how long each second feels. Realize that what you're hearing is not nothing, but the sound of your own mind processing the world. In that awareness, silence transforms from an enemy into a teacher. It asks you to feel every moment, to stretch out time like dough, to realize that the longest seconds are often the ones that matter most. In a world obsessed with noise, the silence duration bias is a quiet rebellion. It shows that time isn't measured only by clocks, but by consciousness. That a single quiet pause truly felt can echo louder and longer than a lifetime of sound. And that maybe, just maybe, the real story of your life is not told in the words or the music, but in the spaces between. The crisis time echo. When a crisis finally passes, when the threat recedes, the storm quiets, and everyone else seems to breathe a sigh of relief. There's a silent expectation that time should return to normal, that you should simply pick up where you left off. But reality is far messier. For those who've lived through a true crisis, whether it's a personal emergency, a natural disaster, a sudden betrayal, or even an upheaval in the world, the end is never really the end. The shock wave may have faded, but its echo continues to vibrate through your perception, distorting the days and weeks that follow in ways you might not expect or even understand. Think about the moment when a crisis hits. Your mind floods with adrenaline, your awareness narrows, and your sense of time twists into something sharp and jagged. Everything outside the emergency seems to fade. All that matters is survival, clarity, and the next immediate step. This is the mind in full crisis mode, attuned to every detail, hyper-aware, counting seconds, sometimes stretching moments into what feels like hours. When the event is finally over, you might expect to return to real time, as if flipping a switch. But the switch is broken. Instead, you're left with an echo, an after-image that tints every hour, every interaction, every quiet moment. This echo is subtle, but profound. You wake up the next day, maybe the next week, expecting relief or gratitude, but instead, there's a strange residue clinging to everything. Time itself feels off balance. Days drag with a heaviness that doesn't fit the calendar. Routine actions, making coffee, sending emails, speaking to people, take on a strange artificial quality, as if you're acting in a play where the script is off by half a second. You find yourself replaying moments of the crisis, where you're haunted by a tension you can't quite name. Sometimes, time seems to move too slowly, as if you're waiting for another shoe to drop. Other times, entire days vanish, lost in a haze of exhaustion and emotional static. This phenomenon isn't just a quirk of memory, it's the mind's way of processing aftermath. The brain, after being blasted with stress hormones and forced into emergency gear, needs time to recalibrate. But the recalibration doesn't happen instantly. Instead, the nervous system continues to hum at a higher frequency, scanning for new threats, unable to relax into the present. You may be safe, but your body doesn't always know it yet. The echo of crisis leaves your perception out of sync with the world around you. Consider the aftermath of a natural disaster. For the people who lived through a hurricane, an earthquake, or a fire, the crisis itself is intense but finite. Yet survivors often describe the weeks after as strangely elongated, filled with sleepless nights and aimless days. Time seems to slow, as if the brain is unwilling to let go of the emergency settings. Or take the example of someone who has just ended a long hospital vigil for a loved one. The crisis ends, but instead of returning to their regular life, they move through the days in slow motion, unable to catch up to the speed of normal living. The crisis might be over, but its echo rings through every minute, keeping the past alive in the present. Even more subtle is how this echo can distort your sense of meaning. The heightened intensity of a crisis can make ordinary life feel flat, empty, or surreal in its wake. The world keeps turning, people keep talking, but you're left with an invisible weight that others can't see. Sometimes, you might even seek out distractions or new crises, hoping to feel that sense of clarity again, because the echo, while uncomfortable, reminds you that something important happened, something that changed the way you move through time itself. This echo isn't always negative. In some cases, it brings a strange focus, a clarity of priorities that lingers after the crisis. You might notice which relationships matter most, or which anxieties have lost their grip. But more often, it's a burden, a chronic sense of tension, restlessness, or sadness that refuses to fade on schedule. You may wonder why you aren't over it, why the echo persists when logic says the danger is gone. The answer is simple. Your mind and body are still processing, still living in the shadow of what just happened. The crisis time echo reminds us that recovery is never a straight line. Time doesn't snap back to normal just because the crisis is over. The residue, emotional, psychological, even physical, sticks around, shaping your days in quiet, often invisible ways. To heal, you have to honor that echo, to allow yourself the patience to live through its fading. Some days will feel stretched thin, others will disappear in a blur, but with each one, the vibration softens. The world will not wait for your clock to reset, but you can learn to move at your own pace, letting the echo become part of your story rather than the end of it. If you've ever wondered why time feels so strange after a crisis, know that you are not alone and you're not broken. Your mind is doing exactly what it needs to, listening for aftershocks, rebuilding a sense of safety, and adjusting to a world that has shifted beneath your feet. In time, the echo will fade, and the residue will thin, but its mark will always remind you of what you survived, and the resilience you found in the stretching, trembling silence that followed. The proximity warp trick, time doesn't just move. It bends. It twists around emotion, warps around anticipation, stretches or shrinks depending on how you feel. A date on a calendar is fixed, but your experience of its distance is anything but. This is the proximity warp trick, when your brain distorts the timeline ahead, making the future feel closer or farther depending on your emotional state. You're not imagining it. When you're anxious about an upcoming event, a deadline, a surgery, a confrontation, it feels impossibly far, like a shadow on the horizon you can't reach, yet can't escape. Each day leading up to it feels swollen. Time expands, but not kindly. It stretches like tension in a wire pulled tight, buzzing with dread. Minutes become harder to breathe inside. You check the clock. You check the date. It hasn't moved, but your body feels like it's been waiting forever. Now flip it. You're excited. A trip, a reunion, a dream coming true. Suddenly, the same amount of time collapses. The event feels close, tangible. You can almost touch it. And yet when it finally arrives, it's like you blinked and it's here. Time rushed to meet your joy, but it didn't actually move faster. You did. You pulled it toward you with your energy. You shrank the timeline with emotion. This isn't fantasy. It's cognitive bias. Your brain doesn't measure time with a ruler. It measures it with meaning. When the future is uncertain, threatening, overwhelming, your brain slows perception. Try to stretch the distance, to prepare, to protect. But when the future is bright, longed for, beautiful, it accelerates. Time is pulled in, condensed. It wants to be close to what feels good. The same week can feel eternal or instant. The same event can feel distant or imminent. The timeline is not broken, it's elastic. And that elasticity plays tricks on you. It makes things seem further away than they are, causing procrastination, denial, delay. You say, that's months away, and then it ambushes you. Or makes things seem so close you panic too soon. You say, I don't have time, when in fact, you do, but your body doesn't believe it. The proximity warp trick causes emotional time blindness. You overprepare for things that aren't here yet, exhausting yourself before they begin. Or you underprepare for things you feel too far away to matter, only to be blindsided when they arrive. In both cases, you're not responding to reality. You're responding to perception. This is why fear steals time from the present. It inflates the future into something heavy, looming, inescapable. Every second is filtered through anticipation. You're not living today. You're bracing for tomorrow. And in doing so, you stretch the distance to the event, making it feel worse than it is. You give it more gravity than it earned. On the other hand, desire can compress time so tightly that the weight feels unbearable. You want it now. You feel cheated by every hour that stands between you and the thing you crave. But the joy of anticipation collapses into impatience. And when the moment finally arrives, it can't live up to the speed with which your mind chased it. The future is not a location. It's an emotion, and that emotion changes shape depending on what you believe it holds. That's why two people waiting for the same date can experience time so differently. One filled with dread, the other with hope. One feels stretched thin, the other feels like they're racing toward a finish line. Same time, same day, different mind. So how do you live when the future keeps changing size? You learn to question your internal ruler. You ask, am I reacting to the date or to the meaning I've assigned it? You pause before spiraling. You remind yourself, the event hasn't moved. My perception has. You separate planning from panicking. You anchor yourself in tasks, not time. You stop counting days and start building readiness. Because anticipation is only helpful if it doesn't eat you alive. And longing is only sweet if it doesn't hollow the now. Sometimes it helps to zoom out. Look at the future from a cosmic scale. What feels massive today is a speck in hindsight. The thing you're panicking over might be forgotten. The thing you're rushing toward might need more time than you think. Time warps around your mind, but it only controls you if you forget that you bend it. You cannot control how quickly time moves, but you can change how you move through it. Slowly, steadily, without letting your emotions reshape every hour into a weapon. The proximity warp trick is a mirror. It shows you how much power your feelings have over your perception. And once you see it for what it is, not a threat, but a trick, you can breathe again. You can stop asking, how long until, and start asking, who do I want to be when it arrives? That's how you win. Not by speeding time up or slowing it down, but by becoming ready no matter when it comes. The regression illusion spiral. There's a strange, spiraling illusion that comes over you when you walk through the doorways of your childhood. You return to the house where you grew up, step into the echoing halls of your old school, stroll the back roads of your hometown, and suddenly, time loses its grip. The years collapse, your carefully constructed adult self flickers, and you feel the old world stirring inside you. What you thought was past rushes forward. What you thought you'd outgrown reawakens with uncanny force. This is the regression illusion spiral, where chronology unravels and emotional déjà vu pulls you into a loop, half memory, half living dream. You tell yourself you're only visiting, that you're older now, changed, immune to the old ghosts. But the illusion is powerful. It starts with the scent, the dust and sunlight of an old room. the smell of rain on pavement you once ran across barefoot. You see the chipped paint on the banister, the childhood height marks scratched into a wall. With every step, your mind searches for forgotten versions of yourself, images flickering through years in an instant. You are a child again, trembling with anticipation or dread. You are a teenager, aching to leave or desperate to belong. You are the adult, remembering, but also feeling. What is it about these places that turns time inside out? The answer lies not only in nostalgia, but in the architecture of memory itself. The mind doesn't just store facts, it stores sensation, mood, color, and the energy of what was. When you revisit these places, your mind doesn't simply recall the past, it tries to relive it. The line between yesterday and today blurs. You might find yourself slipping into old patterns of thought and emotion, even if you know better. The house may be smaller, the roads narrower, but inside you, the spiral is wide, dizzying, infinite. It's an emotional déjà vu, waves of feeling with no clear cause. You walk in your childhood bedroom, and the weight of old fears or the comfort of old safety returns. Sitting at the family table, you may feel the old sibling rivalries flare up or the ache of loneliness resurface, as if the present has merged with every birthday, every argument, every quiet night spent staring at the ceiling. Rationally, you know it's just memory. But the regression illusion spiral is more than a recollection. It is a bodily, all-consuming sensation of vertigo of the soul. Sometimes the spiral is gentle. It brings laughter, fondness, a warmth that colors your adult life with new softness. The playground where you once fell in love with movement, the tree where you used to hide, the window where you watched the world go by. These become shrines to lost innocence, places where you recover pieces of yourself you forgot you missed. You feel gratitude for the child you were, for the resilience you built, for the beauty you saw in the ordinary. But sometimes the spiral is harsh. It drags up old wounds, moments of shame, rejection, or powerlessness. You find yourself reacting to family or old friends as you once did, as if no time has passed at all. You may even feel yourself shrinking, your adult voice muffled, your courage fading in the presence of shadows that never quite left. Chronology collapses, and you're all your ages at once, small, strong, scared, wise, unfinished. Why does this happen? The answer may be that memory isn't linear, that emotion is the true keeper of time. In the places where so much began, your mind runs old software, looping through programs written in childhood. Patterns return not because you haven't grown, but because the setting triggers them. Echoes in the walls, reminders in the light. The regression illusion spiral is a portal, a test, a mirror showing you who you were and who you still might be. This spiral can be healing. It allows you to see with new eyes, to comfort the child within, to forgive yourself for things you didn't know then. Or it can be unsettling, forcing you to confront what you thought you'd buried. But in both cases, it is a call to presence, to witness the layers of your life, to integrate the unfinished stories, to accept that you're always becoming, never finished. In the end, the regression illusion spiral is both a gift and a challenge. It shows you that the past isn't gone. It lives in places, in objects, in smells, in the rhythm of your footsteps. When you revisit, you can choose to run from the spiral, or you can move with it, gathering the wisdom of every self you have been. Time may collapse, but you do not have to. You can walk those old roads as both visitor and native, adult and child, carrying all your ages forward. So the next time you find yourself standing in childhood room, feeling time loop and memory surge, let the spiral carry you. Notice what returns, what still needs to be healed, what can finally be left behind. Let the déjà vu remind you that you are not stuck. You're spiraling upward, growing from every circle, able to step forward even as you look back. The past may call, but you get to answer as the person you are now, richer, deeper, more whole with every return. The memory layer collapse. Memory, for all its supposed order and logic, is rarely a straight line. We like to imagine our past as a timeline, a neat chain of dates, events, and faces, each memory stored in its own box, carefully labeled, waiting to be retrieved at will. But the truth is stranger, messier, and infinitely more human. Sometimes, when you reach into your mind for a recollection, you find not a single thread, but a tangled knot. Years overlap, emotions blend, people from different eras of your life appear together in one hazy scene. This is the memory layer collapse, the way your brain, striving to make sense of your story, overlaps time itself, blurring boundaries between events and emotions until the past becomes a collage with no clear edges. You may notice it in the quietest moments. A song plays on the radio, and suddenly you are a teenager, driving through rain-slick streets with friends you haven't seen in a decade, but you're also the adult you've become, carrying responsibilities and regrets. The scent of a certain perfume or the taste of a dish your grandmother once made can bring a flood of memories, some from childhood, some from recent years, all swirling together in an instant that seems outside of time. It's as if your mind has layered snapshots atop one another, transparencies stacking so that details from different years blend, overlap, and lose their order. Why does this happen? The answer lies in the way memory is built, not as a file cabinet, but as a living network of associations. When you remember, you're not playing back a recording. You're reconstructing piece by piece, using fragments linked by emotion, senses, and significance. Strong emotions, love, grief, joy, fear, are the glue, sticking years together until you can't quite say whether a memory belongs to 2005 or 2015, or whether that laughter in your mind is from a party in your 20s or a night last week. It often happens with nostalgia. Look at an old photograph, and your mind may summon not just the moment it was taken, but echoes of all similar moments, other birthdays, other faces, the smell of childhood summers, the anxiety of young adulthood. The boundaries between events collapse, leaving you with a sensation not of one memory, but of many, tangled into a feeling that is more real than any single day could ever be. This is the memory layer collapse, a blending of time, emotion, and sense so rich that it can be both comforting and disorienting. Sometimes this collapse is triggered by loss. Grief scrambles time in the mind. When someone you love is gone, you find yourself holding memories you thought were distinct. Childhood laughter, hospital rooms, midnight conversations, suddenly merged into a single, overwhelming wave. You might remember a long-ago hug and feel, in the same moment, the pain of their absence today. The years between collapse, and all the versions of yourself who love them are present at once. Or think of trauma, how moments of fear or shame from different periods of your life can overlay, creating a composite pain that is hard to untangle. A word spoken in anger today might dredge up every argument you've ever had, every feeling of being small or powerless, all stacked together until you can't separate now from then. Memory, when under stress, abandons chronology in favor of intensity. But this collapse is not always painful. Sometimes it is the source of our richest, most layered experiences. Falling in love, for example, can feel like the mind is opening old boxes. Every previous romance, every flutter of hope, every echo of heartbreak, swirling beneath the surface of your present. A single touch might summon ghosts of every other touch, blending past and present until time becomes an ocean instead of a river. The memory layer collapse can even color how you tell your own story. When asked to recall your life, you may struggle to put events in order. Did that happen before or after college? Was she in your life during that job or another? Sometimes the facts blur, but the emotions remain vivid, bleeding from one chapter to the next. The result is a narrative built less on sequence and more on feeling, a mosaic rather than a timeline. Science offers some explanation. Memories are stored in overlapping neural circuits. Each time you recall an event, you rewrite it, connecting it to the thoughts and feelings you have now. Over time, these links create a network so dense that, when you access one memory, echoes of many others come along for the ride. The boundaries dissolve, replaced by constellations of association. Your mind is less a historian and more a poet, weaving the past into whatever form helps you make sense of the present. There's a strange beauty in this imperfection. It allows us to see our lives not as rigid sequences, but as living, breathing wholes. You are not just who you were at one age or another, but the sum of all your experiences folded together in memory's strange light. When you feel joy or sorrow now, you're often feeling the layers of all the joys and sorrows you've ever known, pressed together until time itself becomes secondary. But the collapse can be unsettling, too. It can leave you feeling unmoored, unsure of where certain parts of your story begin or end. You might wonder if you're losing your grip, when in fact your brain is doing what it's always done, blurring lines to protect you, to teach you, to make meaning out of chaos. If you notice the memory layer collapse in your own life, don't fight it. Embrace it as a testament to the richness of being alive. Let your mind roam across the years, letting old and new, happy and sad, blend together. This is how we grieve, how we heal, how we grow. Time and memory is not a straight path, but a spiral, a deepening circle that brings us back, again and again, to the moments that shaped us, colored by all that came before and after. So the next time you find yourself lost in a memory, unable to say when or where it truly belongs, remember that this, too, is human. Your mind is a collage, not a calendar. The past lives inside you in layers, tangled and beautiful, giving depth to every feeling, every story, every ordinary day. In that collapse, there's a hidden kind of wisdom, a reminder that you're never just one moment, but all of them, forever intertwined. The calendar compression curve. The calendar on your wall is not just a grid of days and numbers. It's a graveyard for the passing of time, a fragile map of the years you've survived. But the strange truth is, you do not actually live by dates. You live by events, by the moments that carve meaning into the flow of existence. The mind's measurement of time is not mechanical, but emotional, subjective, deeply tied to the rhythm of your own story. This is the secret of the calendar compression curve, a hidden pattern that bends time in ways clocks cannot capture. When life falls into monotony, each month blurs into the next, and whole years compress into a single gray streak in memory. But when life is full of change, challenge, newness, and transformation, time stretches out, dense with memory, every season vivid and distinct. Imagine two people standing at the edge of a new year. One is trapped in routine. Same job, same commute, same tired conversations, days spent on autopilot, marking dates only to pay bills or remember deadlines. The other is a traveler, moving cities, making new friends, facing risks, learning new skills. For the first, the year ahead will compress. The days will slide past unnoticed. Only the holidays and a handful of crises will stand out. At the end of it all, they'll wonder where the time went. For the second, the year will unfold like a thick novel, every page crowded with new faces and places, each week marked by a distinct memory. To them, the same 12 months will feel much longer, as if they had lived several lives in the space of one. This is the calendar compression curve, the way your mind warps the shape of time based on the density of experience. Your memories do not arrange themselves by date, but by event. When you look back, you remember the wedding, the accident, the night you got lost in a city you barely knew, the birth of your child, the time you quit your job and started over. You do not remember the thousands of silent mornings, the repetition of laundry and dishes and deadlines. These repetitions vanish from memory, and with them, whole months collapse into a single heartbeat. This is why childhood, crammed with new experiences, feels endless in retrospect, while adulthood, with its routines, seems to accelerate. There is a profound consequence to this psychological law. The less your life changes, the faster your sense of time accelerates. Weeks vanish, seasons blend, and before you know it, you find yourself saying things like, "How is it August already?" Or "This year just disappeared." But this isn't just an illusion. It's your brain editing out the unremarkable. Only what stands out survives the compression. Novelty, challenge, even discomfort all work as anchors in your memory, stretching time and making it feel full. Consider the way the pandemic warped collective time. For many, those years blurred together. A monotony of indoor days, routines forced by lockdown, nothing new to break the pattern. When people try to recall that period, it feels both recent and impossibly far away, a blank stretch in memory. But for healthcare workers, families facing crisis, or those who had to adapt quickly, those same years feel crammed with detail. Stressful, yes, but unforgettable. In both cases, the objective time was the same, but the calendar compression curve bent in opposite directions, depending on the density of lived experience. You can feel this curve working in your own life. Think about the last time you did something entirely new, moved to a different city, started a relationship, traveled somewhere strange, learned a skill that scared you. How clearly you remember those days. Now try to recall a week where every day was identical. Chances are it's a blank, indistinguishable from the week before or after. This is not failure of memory. It is the mind's way of saving space for what matters. There's a kind of quiet tragedy in this mechanism. If you're not careful, you can sleepwalk through years, wake up, and realize that most of your life has been compressed into a handful of memories, the rest lost in repetition. The calendar fills up with X's and appointments, but your soul starves for meaning. The solution is both simple and terrifying. Invite change. Seek out newness, even when it's uncomfortable. Make rituals for marking time. Write letters to yourself. Celebrate small victories. Mourn losses with intention. Anchor your life with moments that are worth remembering, so that when you look back, your years are not a blur, but a tapestry. The calendar compression curve is not destiny. It is a warning and an invitation. If you want to slow down time, don't wait for life to surprise you. Surprise yourself. Challenge your routines. Notice the details. Even a single different day, a spontaneous road trip, a new recipe, a meaningful conversation can stretch a week into something dense and unforgettable. Time, after all, is elastic. It bends to the weight of experience, growing longer and richer with every new thing you dare to do. And one day, when you look back on your own story, you will be grateful not for the years you counted, but for the moments you truly lived. The identity timeline rift. There are moments in life when you look back at your own story and feel an eerie sense of detachment, as if you're watching someone else's memories flicker by on a distant screen. The laughter, the pain, the choices you made, all of it seems to belong to another character, another era, another world. This is the identity timeline rift, a split within your own narrative that makes the person you once were feel like a stranger living in a parallel timeline. It's not just nostalgia or regret. It's a deep, unsettling fracture in your continuity of self. You remember being a child, your obsessions, your fears, your dreams, and sometimes you can recall the intensity of those emotions so vividly it aches. But when you try to merge that version of yourself with the one you see in the mirror now, something doesn't fit. The faces in old photographs, the handwriting in your journals, even the voices in your memories, they don't quite match the person narrating your life today. It's as if time hasn't simply passed, but carved a canyon between then and now, making you the observer of your own origin story instead of its author. This rift grows sharper after major life upheavals. A painful breakup, a move to a new city, a severe illness, a spiritual awakening, or surviving a trauma. In the aftermath, you look back and struggle to reconcile the person who lived those moments with the one you've become. The music you loved now sounds foreign. The habits and hobbies you once clung to feel pointless. You remember the choices you made, but not the motives that drove them. When people remind you, you used to be so different, it's both true and bewildering. You recognize your history intellectually, but emotionally, it feels like inherited footage. Something you're supposed to care about, but can't fully inhabit. Psychologists call this autobiographical discontinuity. It's a common feature of depression PTSD, or periods of rapid growth. But it isn't always pathological. Sometimes, it's simply the result of surviving life's relentless changes. You outgrow your past selves, shedding identities like skins, until the link between chapters weakens. Yet the mind craves continuity. We want to see our lives as a single arc, a coherent journey with a stable protagonist. When a rift appears, it threatens that story. You start to wonder, was that really me? Did I truly feel those things? Or am I just remembering the memory? Am I the same person at all? Think about the way memories shift over time. That embarrassing thing you did as a teenager, does it sting you now? Or do you view it with a kind of detached compassion, as if watching a movie about someone else's mistakes? Or recall a time when you were consumed by a certain passion or friendship. Maybe you can still recall the details, the colors, the urgency of those days, but the emotional charge has drained away, leaving only the outline. Sometimes, the rift is so deep that you genuinely cannot recognize your own motivations. Why did you fight so hard for something that no longer matters? Why did you let yourself get hurt by things that now seem trivial? In its darkest form, the identity timeline rift can make you question your very reality. If you can't connect to your own past, how do you know who you are now? You might feel like an imposter in your own body, a ghost haunting the rooms of someone else's life. This is especially common for those who've experienced dissociation, trauma, or prolonged stress. But it can also appear in subtler, more existential ways. After a decade passes in a blur, after a parent dies and you inherit the adult role, or when you realize the dreams you chased no longer belong to you. Yet, there's a paradox here, because the rift is both a wound and a testament to your growth. The fact that you feel divided means you've changed, survived, adapted. The past self may feel like a stranger, but they are also the raw material from which you've been shaped. Every version of you, from the earliest memories to the person you are now, exists somewhere on your timeline, echoing forward in your choices and reactions, even if you can't always access them directly. Sometimes, bridging the rift means reaching back with kindness, not judgment. Instead of mourning the loss of old selves or resenting their mistakes, you learn to see them as travelers who carried you here. Their timeline may feel distant, but their journey is folded inside your own. Reflecting on the rift can even help you reclaim agency. By noticing how much you survived, how many versions of yourself have risen and fallen, you realize that the story is still unfolding, and you are still its author, no matter how many plot twists lie ahead. So when your life feels like a patchwork of timelines, remember, you're not alone. This dislocation is a secret language of survival, of transformation, of adaptation to the unpredictable storms of existence. The faces in old photos, the handwriting in faded journals, the dreams you no longer chase, all of them are real. All of them are you, even when it feels like you're watching from the outside, a visitor to your own past. The rift is strange, sometimes painful, but it is also a sign that you are alive, changing, and, despite it all, moving forward. The parallel time sensation. There are moments when your present life stands beside a ghost, another version of you, shaped by a choice you didn't make. You walk through a city, but somewhere in your mind, you're also living somewhere else. You hold someone's hand, but somewhere inside, you wonder what it would have felt like to hold someone else's. You said yes when you could have said no. You stayed when you could have left. And in that difference, you created a split, not in the world, but in yourself. This is the parallel time sensation, the quiet haunting of what could have been that emotionally coexists with what is. It's not fantasy. It's memory weaponized by imagination. You don't just wonder what might have happened. You feel it. That other life doesn't live in theory. It breathes just outside of reach. It has weight, color, emotion. You see in flashes, in regrets, in dreams, in the silence between moments. It's a phantom timeline, real not because it exists, but because it's felt. Your current life might be stable, even good, but this other version whispers behind your happiness. It asks, what if you had turned left instead of right? Called back, taken the risk, said the truth? It doesn't accuse. It offers a parallel sensation that runs beneath the surface like an alternate heartbeat. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because the mind, when it imagines, fills in details emotionally, not logically. That alternate life isn't built from facts, it's built from longing. You imagine what you're missing without imagining what it might have cost. You see the highlight reel of the road not taken, but not the shadows that might have lived there. Still, it feels real. You find yourself mourning things that never existed, missing people who were never yours, holding emotional space for lives you never lived. And yet, they take up room. They occupy attention. They affect your mood. Because in your mind, the timelines blur. You're not just living one life. You're emotionally straddling two. This isn't delusion. It's a known cognitive phenomenon. Psychologists call it counterfactual thinking. The brain creates alternatives to reality to make sense of consequence. If I had done X, Y might have happened. It helps us learn, but also makes us ache. Because sometimes those imagined outcomes aren't educational. They're seductive. And when they're charged with emotion, love, loss, ambition, guilt, they become emotionally sticky. You replay them. You sculpt them. You build whole narratives around people you barely knew or choices you barely made. Suddenly, the life you're living feels like only one of several open tabs. And worse, not necessarily the best one. You begin to judge your reality by comparing it to the potential that never matured. The life you have becomes a compromise. The love you chose becomes a consolation. And even your joy gets infected with the question, would I be happier over there? But the parallel time sensation doesn't care about truth. It only needs your imagination to cooperate. It's why people stay haunted by what never happened. Why someone might cry for a life they never lived or carry guilt for a path they didn't take. Because to the emotional brain, imagined time is still time, and lost potential still feels like loss. The danger isn't that we imagine other timelines. The danger is that we feed them. You revisit old messages. You replay conversations. You stalk the what if. And with each revisit, the phantom timeline becomes richer, more defined, more believable. Until it's hard to tell whether your sadness is about what happened or what didn't. But here's what we forget. That alternate self doesn't know peace. It doesn't know the wisdom you earned from this path. It doesn't know the heartbreaks that shaped your strength or the detours that built your depth. It is, in the end, a version of you frozen in imagination, without scars, without survival. And that makes it seductive, but shallow. You are here, in this time, in this version, not by accident, but through fire, through countless unseen choices that no timeline can replicate. So how do you deal with the parallel? You don't destroy it. You acknowledge it. You say, yes, I see you. I feel you, but I don't live there. You honor the paths not taken. But you stop feeding them. You stop scrolling through phantom memories. You stop comparing your reality to a fantasy curated by selective memory and emotional hunger. And instead, you re-enter your present timeline with your whole self. You ask, what choice can I make today that I'll be proud to have taken? Because now is the only point from which any future is born. And when you live fully here, you don't need to borrow from alternate lives. You build the one you're in. The past is a museum. The future, a blueprint. But the present, it's the construction site. Don't let ghosts design your life. Live in the only timeline that lets you touch. The one where your breath counts. The one where you are. The expectation time filter. There's a subtle lens that shapes every experience before it even begins. A filter woven from your own expectations, quietly distorting your sense of time. Before you start, before a single minute passes, your mind makes a silent prediction. This will take forever, or this will be over in a blink. And somehow, that assumption plants itself deep inside you, bending the hours and minutes to its logic. If you expect something to last, it drags on. If you expect it to fly by, it disappears almost before it's begun. The expectation time filter isn't magic. It's one of the mind's quietest and most profound tricks, warping duration not through clocks, but through belief. Think of waiting in a doctor's office, trapped between bland wallpaper and the hum of a slow clock. You tell yourself this will take ages, that you'll be stuck here, watching the hands crawl. And sure enough, every minute stretches out, thick and heavy, your boredom growing, your patience thinning. You check your phone, check your watch, check the walls for hidden clues to time's passing. The wait becomes not just an event, but a sentence, a prediction fulfilled by your own anticipation. Contrast that with the moments you expect to vanish. Maybe it's a long-awaited concert, the arrival of a friend you haven't seen in years, the first day of a long-planned vacation. You step into the experience, certain it will be over too quickly, and so it is. The hours rush by, blurring together in a whirl of sensation and memory, and before you can savor the sweetness, it's already over. You look back, hungry for more, convinced time has played a trick. But it was your mind that set the tempo, your assumption that accelerated the clock. This filter operates everywhere, not just in the obvious extremes. You sit through a meeting expecting tedium, and the minutes creep. You dive into a new project, convinced it will be effortless, and you're startled by how little time you have left. You brace for a tough workout, predicting struggle, and each set feels endless. You prepare for a brief phone call, certain it'll be quick, only to find yourself rushing, shocked at how little time remains. In each case, expectation sculpts your reality before it ever arrives. The science behind this illusion is rooted in attention and prediction. When you anticipate slowness, your awareness sharpens. Every tick of the clock, every sigh, every detail gets magnified, stretching your perception of time. Your mind marks every milestone, counting down in impatience, cataloging discomfort. But when you expect speed, your focus drifts. You relax, let go, stop noticing the passage of each second. Your awareness narrows to the highlights, the moments of pleasure or excitement, letting the rest slip past. In both cases, your internal clock is not objective. It's reactive, bent by the lens of assumption. This filter doesn't just affect how you feel about time. It shapes your behavior, too. If you expect a challenge to take forever, you hesitate to begin. You procrastinate, convinced the task will swallow your day. If you believe something will pass in a flash, you may rush through, failing to linger, failing to notice. Sometimes, expectation robs you of presence before you even enter the experience. You carry your assumptions in with you, and they become self-fulfilling. There's a deeper existential twist, too. If you live your life expecting only the slow slog of endurance, you may find the years dragging, even in memory. If you expect joy to be fleeting, you may miss it as it slips through your hands, always gone before you fully receive it. Your beliefs become the architects of your lived experience, stretching, shrinking, sculpting every hour and day. But here lies the possibility of freedom. If you know the filter is there, you can begin to loosen its grip. You can step into moments with curiosity, not prediction, with openness, not foregone conclusion. You can practice meeting each experience as it is, not as you assume it will be. In doing so, you might find time softening, expanding, becoming less a trickster and more companion. Next time you catch yourself dreading a long task, pause. Ask what expectation you're bringing. Next time you prepare for a joyful event, notice how quickly you assume it will end. Bring your attention back, again and again, to the now, to the unfiltered flow of seconds, to the possibility that duration can be rewritten by presence. The expectation time filter is a powerful lens, but it's not unbreakable. In awareness, in presence, you find a truer experience of time, one not shaped by fear or desire, but by the quiet reality of living. Maybe then, the hours will be what they truly are, not long, not short, but enough. The celebrations shrink glitch. Why do the happiest moments in our lives, the parties, the reunions, the celebrations we long for, seem to pass in a flash, no matter how much we try to hold on to them? Why does every birthday, every festival, every night spent laughing with friends leave us with a sense that it was too brief, as if joy itself is always on the run? This is the celebration shrink glitch, a subtle distortion wired into the way our brains process time and memory, one that turns the best days into elusive fragments and leaves us, again and again, hungry for more. The phenomenon begins long before the celebration starts. For days or weeks, anticipation builds. You circle the date on the calendar, imagine the laughter, the music, the people you love all gathered in one place. Your mind dwells in the future, rehearsing what you'll say, picturing what it will feel like when the moment finally arrives. The wait feels endless. Time crawls, expanding under the pressure of longing and hope. And then, suddenly it's here. The door opens, people flood in, voices fill the air. Music swells, candles flicker, glasses are raised. For a while, you're caught in the center of a bright, spinning world. But somewhere in the middle of the celebration, a strange awareness creeps in. You glance at the clock. How is it already halfway through the night? You try to press pause, to soak it all in, but the moments keep slipping past. No matter how hard you focus, it all feels like it's racing by, as if happiness itself is in a hurry to leave. Later, when it's over, you're left with the sense that you missed something, that the best part of the night was always just out of reach. Even as you replay the laughter, the hugs, the spark of connection, the details feel blurry, like snapshots taken from a moving car. The joy was real, but in memory, it's as if the night has been shrunk down, reduced to a handful of moments, the rest fading into a bright, longing ache. This is not just a trick of nostalgia, but a built-in quirk of how the mind encodes experience. Scientists have found that the brain is more likely to record detailed memories during times of novelty, surprise, or even discomfort. Routine and pain, ironically, can stretch out in memory because the mind keeps careful track of what feels new or threatening. But joy, especially when it's expected, can actually cause the brain to relax its recording process. When you're deeply happy, you're less self-conscious, less likely to mentally narrate what's happening. You are present, swept up in the current, and your mind doesn't pause to label or catalog every detail. The result? Happiness shrinks in recollection, leaving you with fewer mental snapshots than you'd expect. Think back to a childhood birthday. You waited for weeks. The night before was almost unbearable with excitement. But the party itself? Just flashes, the cake, the unwrapping of gifts, a song, a blurry photo. The build-up was long, but the payoff, in memory, is a blink. Or recall the last wedding or reunion you attended. Days of planning, hours of travel, then the actual event. An emotional rush, faces and laughter tumbling over one another. And suddenly, it's midnight, the chairs are being stacked, and you wonder where it all went. The celebration shrink glitch is why, after every festival or win, you're left searching for ways to hold onto the feeling. You scroll through photos, call friends to reminisce, replay videos, hoping to re-expand the night in your mind. But no matter how many times you return, the feeling always seems smaller, more distant. Joy resists being captured. It wants to live only in the present, not as a permanent archive. There's also a psychological cost to this glitch. Because happy moments shrink, we're driven to chase them, believing that next time we'll be able to grasp more, remember better, feel fuller. We plan more parties, dream of bigger celebrations, thinking that happiness can be stretched by sheer will. But when the next moment comes, it too flashes past, leaving us with the same sweet ache, the same shrinking echo. This is not a flaw, but a strange form of mercy. If joy lingered as sharply as sorrow, it would crowd out our ability to move forward, to seek newness, to long for more. The shrinking of celebration and memory is what keeps us searching, striving, returning to one another. It's why every reunion feels magical, and every farewell carries a tinge of sadness. Happiness is fleeting, and the mind's under-recording of it is a gentle push, an invitation to keep living, to make new memories, to never settle for less than another round of laughter, another dance beneath the stars. But if you understand the celebration shrink glitch, you can work with it. You can anchor joy more firmly by paying intentional attention, pausing in the middle of the party to notice the color of the lights, the warmth in a friend's voice, the shape of your own smile. You can tell stories the next day, sharing the best moments while they're fresh, weaving them into your memory before they shrink too far. Most of all, you can accept that happiness is meant to be elusive, a bright current that pulls you through life, always urging you to swim a little farther, try a little harder, risk a little more. So next time you find yourself wishing a celebration would last forever, remember, it never will. That's the secret of joy. Its intensity is inseparable from its brevity. The best nights, the sweetest reunions, the wildest winds, all are designed to be too short, to leave you hungry, to keep you searching for the next burst of light. And that hunger is not emptiness, but a kind of fuel. The reason life keeps unfolding, the reason you keep returning to the people and places that make you feel most alive. The celebration shrink glitch is the mind's way of protecting the future, of making room for new joys yet to come. Each time happiness shrinks in memory, it leaves space for something unexpected to enter. In that empty ache, in that longing for just one more minute, is the truth at the heart of being human. Joy is not meant to be held, but to be chased, savored, and, above all, lived again and again for as long as you can.